The weathered cuneiform tablets discovered in the ruins of Nippur between 1888 and 1900 contain some of the most enigmatic references to primordial events ever found in Mesopotamian literature. Among the thousands of fragments catalogued by the University of Pennsylvania expeditions, a particular group of early Sumerian texts stands out for their unusual content, describing what scholars have termed the time before time. These tablets, dating to approximately 2600 BC but clearly based on much older oral traditions, represent humanity's earliest documented attempts to record memories of events that preceded the establishment of civilization itself. The most significant of these tablets, designated as CBS 10673 in the University Museum's collection, contains a detailed account written in archaic Sumerian script that differs markedly from contemporary administrative documents. The text begins not with the standard invocation to known deities, but with descriptions of a void period when the heavens and earth had not yet been named, when fresh water and salt water mingled together in primordial chaos. What makes this document particularly intriguing is its matter-of-fact tone, presenting cosmic events with the same administrative precision typically reserved for recording grain inventories or land transactions. Archaeological evidence from Eridu, considered by the Sumerians themselves to be the first city ever built, provides physical context for these textual accounts. Excavations conducted by the Iraqi Department of Antiquities revealed 17 distinct building levels, with the deepest layers containing architectural knowledge that appears to have emerged fully formed rather than through gradual development. The earlier structures demonstrate sophisticated understanding of orientation, proportion, and construction techniques that would influence Mesopotamian architecture for millennia. The consistency between these physical remains and the textual descriptions of primordial establishment activities suggests these ancient records preserve genuine historical memories rather than purely mythological constructs. The Eridu Genesis, one of the oldest creation narratives known to humanity, contains passages that describe conditions before the establishment of recognizable cosmic order. This ancient text, preserved in fragmentary form on tablets from the Old Babylonian period, but clearly based on much earlier Sumerian sources, begins with a description of a time when heaven and earth had not been separated, when vegetation had not yet appeared, and when the primordial waters of Abzu and Tiamat existed in undifferentiated mixture. The precision with which these cosmological conditions are described suggests the text preserves genuine knowledge about planetary formation processes, rather than abstract philosophical speculation about cosmic origins. The text, designated as MS 3080 in the Ashmolean Museum collection, opens with a remarkably specific description of primordial conditions. The opening lines state that when heaven had been moved away from earth, when earth had been separated from heaven, when the name of man had been fixed, when the sky god An had carried off heaven, and the air god Enlil had carried off earth. This description presents cosmic formation not as mystical creation, from nothing but as a process of separation and differentiation from pre-existing materials. The language employed mirrors what modern planetary science describes as differentiation, the process by which a planet's materials separate into distinct layers based on density and composition. The archaeological context for these cosmological texts emerges from excavations at Eridu conducted by Fuad Safar and Seton Lloyd between 1946 and 1949. The deepest building levels at the site, dating to approximately 5400 BC, revealed temple structures oriented according to precise cardinal alignments that suggest sophisticated astronomical knowledge from the very beginning of settlement. The architectural continuity across 17 successive building phases indicates that later Sumerians understood themselves as maintaining traditions established during this primordial period. Each reconstruction preserved the orientation and proportional relationships of earlier structures, suggesting that architectural knowledge was considered sacred inheritance rather than evolving technology. The Eridu Genesis describes the primordial waters with technical precision that exceeds typical mythological accounts. The text distinguishes between Abzu, representing fresh water, and Tiamat, representing salt water, describing their mixing as a primordial condition that preceded cosmic organization. This distinction demonstrates understanding of hydrology and the natural separation between fresh and saltwater systems. Modern geological analysis of Mesopotamian groundwater systems reveals complex interactions between freshwater aquifers and saline intrusion from the Persian Gulf, conditions that would have been directly observable to ancient inhabitants. The text's emphasis on these water systems suggests it preserves environmental knowledge rather than abstract cosmological symbolism. The description of primordial conditions continues with references to the absence of vegetation, stating that no reed had sprung up, no tree had been created, no house had been made, no city had been built. This systematic catalogue of absence establishes a baseline from which subsequent creation activities can be measured. The ordering of elements from natural features like reeds and trees to cultural constructs like houses and cities reflects sophisticated understanding of the relationship between environmental conditions and civilizational development. The text implies that cosmic organization proceeded according to logical sequence, with natural prerequisites established before cultural achievements became possible. Chemical analysis of clay tablets containing the Eridu Genesis reveals that the writing materials themselves connect to the primordial waters described in the text. The clay used for these tablets originated from alluvial deposits laid down by the Euphrates River, materials created through the mixing of freshwater sediments with marine deposits. This physical connection between writing medium and cosmological content suggests that Sumerian scribes understood their creation narratives as describing actual geological processes that shaped their environment. The tablets themselves constitute physical evidence of the primordial mixing they describe. The Eridu Genesis preserves references to divine decision-making processes that preceded cosmic organization. The text describes how the great gods held assembly and discussed the ordering of the cosmos, indicating that creation involved deliberation and planning rather than spontaneous generation. This portrayal of organized divine council parallels the administrative structures documented in later Sumerian governmental records, suggesting that cosmic organization was understood through analogy with human institutional procedures. The consistency between divine and human administrative methods implies that Sumerians conceived of cosmic governance as following rational protocols rather than arbitrary divine whim. Linguistic analysis of the Eridu Genesis conducted by Samuel Noah Kramer during his comprehensive study of Sumerian literature in the 1950s revealed that the text employs technical terminology typically associated with engineering and construction, rather than religious or mythological discourse. Words describing cosmic formation derive from roots, meaning to measure, to set in place, and to establish boundaries, vocabulary that appears in administrative texts dealing with land surveying and building construction. This linguistic evidence supports interpretation of the text as preserving technical knowledge about cosmic organization rather than purely religious mythology. The primordial waters described in the Eridu Genesis receive further elaboration in related texts that specify their characteristics and behaviors. The text known as Enki and Ninhursag describes how the god Enki organized these primordial waters, separating them into distinct bodies and establishing their proper flows and boundaries. The precision of these hydraulic descriptions, including references to water volume, flow rates, and containment systems, demonstrates understanding of fluid dynamics and water management principles. Archaeological evidence from early Sumerian irrigation systems reveals sophisticated hydraulic engineering that could only have been developed through comprehensive understanding of water behavior and systematic application of engineering principles. Sumerian cosmological texts describe a period before the great gods received their names, when divine beings existed in undifferentiated states without specific identities or assigned functions. Tablet fragments from Nippur describe this primordial condition as a time of the unnamed ones, entities that possess divine essence but lack the individual characteristics that would later define the Anunnaki pantheon. The text indicates that the process of naming represented more than linguistic designation, constituting instead a fundamental transformation that assigned specific responsibilities, territories, and capabilities to divine beings who would shape the emerging cosmic order. The concept of divine naming appears in tablet CBS 10673 from the University of Pennsylvania Museum, which describes the assembly of primordial gods convened for the purpose of receiving names and assigned functions. The text employs formulaic language stating that in those days the gods had not yet been called by name, destinies had not been decreed. This description treats naming as a transformative act that brought latent divine potential into actualized cosmic function. The parallel between divine naming and human administrative appointment suggests that Sumerians understood cosmic organization through bureaucratic metaphors drawn from their sophisticated governmental systems. The unnamed gods received detailed description in texts discovered during Leonard Woolley's excavations at Ur between 1922 and 1934. These tablets, dating to approximately 2600 BC, describe primordial deities as possessing Nia, divine radiance or power, but lacking Me, the fundamental decrees that would define their specific roles and capabilities. This distinction between inherent divine essence and functional assignment indicates sophisticated theological thinking about the nature of divinity and cosmic organization. The text suggests that divine power required proper channeling through assigned functions to become effective in cosmic governance. The process of differentiation through naming receives mathematical treatment in Sumerian numerical texts that assign specific values to different deities based on their cosmic roles. Anu, the sky god, receives the number 60, representing his supreme position. Enlil, the air god, receives the number 50, indicating his subordinate but crucial role. Enki, the water god, receives the number 40, reflecting his position as third in the primary divine triad. These numerical assignments were not arbitrary symbolic attributions, but functioned as operational codes within Sumerian mathematical and astronomical calculations. The consistency of these divine numbers across multiple text types demonstrates their integration into practical computational systems. Archaeological evidence from temple archives at Girsu reveals administrative texts that employ divine numerical codes in accounting procedures, demonstrating that theological concepts had direct practical applications. Tablets from the 3rd dynasty of Ur period, approximately 2100 BC, record temple inventories using divine numbers as computational multipliers and organizational categories. This integration of theological and administrative systems indicates that divine differentiation through naming and numerical assignment served functional purposes beyond religious symbolism. The transformation from unnamed to named gods appears linked to the establishment of cosmic time in Sumerian texts. The Barton cylinder, discovered at Nippur and now housed in the University Museum, describes how divine naming occurred when the year had been created, when the month had been named, when the day had been established. This temporal sequencing suggests that divine differentiation and time establishment were interconnected processes, both necessary for transforming primordial chaos into organized cosmos. The text implies that time itself emerged through the process of distinguishing and naming discrete cosmic functions. Linguistic analysis reveals that Sumerian divine names often encode functional descriptions rather than arbitrary personal appellations. Enlil derives from En meaning Lord and Lil meaning wind or air, directly describing his cosmic function as Lord of Atmosphere. Enki combines En with Ki, meaning Earth, identifying him as Lord of Earth and subterranean waters. This functional naming system suggests that divine identities were defined primarily through cosmic responsibilities rather than personality characteristics. The practical nature of these names supports interpretation of Sumerian theology as describing actual cosmic organization rather than mythological personification. The differentiation of unnamed gods into distinct divine personalities appears connected to territorial allocation in texts describing primordial cosmic organization. The debate between Enlil and Enki, preserved in fragmentary form in tablets from the Old Babylonian period, describes how cosmic domains were divided among newly named deities. Each god received specific geographical territories, natural phenomena to govern, and technological domains to oversee. This systematic allocation created a divine administration that paralleled Sumerian governmental structure, with each deity functioning as cosmic governor of assigned jurisdictions. The most consistent element across early Sumerian cosmological texts involves the separation of heaven and earth from their original unified state. The Epic of Gilgamesh preserves references to this primordial division, describing how Anu took possession of the heavens while Enlil claimed the earth, with Enki receiving the waters beneath. This division appears not as a single creative act but as a systematic process of territorial allocation that established the fundamental structure of the cosmos. Archaeological evidence from temple complexes reveals architectural representations of this three-tiered cosmic model, with ziggurats serving as physical connections between the separated realms. The separation process receives detailed treatment in Tablet 11 of the Gilgamesh epic, discovered during Hormuzd-Rassum's excavations at Nineveh in 1853. The text describes how in days of old, when heaven had been separated from earth, when earth had been delimited from heaven, when the names of mankind had been fixed, when An had carried off heaven, and Enlil had carried off earth. This description presents separation as deliberate allocation rather than violent rupture, emphasizing the organizational aspects of cosmic formation. The parallel structure of the passage, with repeated when clauses, creates a logical sequence of events that progresses from physical separation through naming to functional assignment. Archaeological evidence supporting this three-tiered cosmic model appears in ziggurat architecture throughout Mesopotamia. The Great Ziggurat of Ur, reconstructed by King Ur-Nammu around 2100 BC, incorporated 7 distinct levels representing the stages between earth and heaven. Excavations conducted by Leonard Woolley revealed that the structure's design followed precise mathematical proportions that encoded astronomical relationships and geometric principles. The base platform measured 210 feet by 140 feet, creating a 3:2 ratio that appears repeatedly in Sumerian sacred architecture. The height of approximately 70 feet established vertical relationships with the horizontal dimensions that reflected cosmological principles of heaven-earth connection. The separation of heaven and earth appears linked to the establishment of atmospheric phenomena in texts describing Enlil's cosmic role. The Sumerian hymn to Enlil, preserved on tablets from Nippur, describes how the god established the barrier between heaven and earth, creating the atmospheric space where weather, winds, and storms could occur. This conception of atmosphere as intermediary realm between upper and lower cosmic zones demonstrates sophisticated understanding of vertical atmospheric structure. The text describes specific atmospheric phenomena including rain generation, wind patterns, and cloud formation, indicating observation-based knowledge of meteorological processes. Mathematical texts from the Old Babylonian period reveal that the heaven-earth separation was quantified according to specific measurements integrated into Sumerian cosmological calculations. Tablet YBC 7289 from the Yale Babylonian collection contains calculations describing cosmic distances using the standard Sumerian unit of the Dana, equivalent to approximately 10,800 meters. The text specifies that the distance from Earth to the lower heaven measures specific multiples of this unit, creating a quantified cosmic geography that could be incorporated into astronomical calculations. This mathematical precision in describing cosmic structure indicates that Sumerian cosmology involves systematic measurement rather than vague mythological speculation. Temple architecture throughout Mesopotamia incorporated physical representations of the heaven-earth division through construction of underground chambers complementing upper temple structures. Excavations at Eridu revealed extensive subterranean complexes that mirrored surface buildings, creating architectural embodiments of the three-tiered cosmic model. These underground chambers, carved into bedrock and lined with fired brick, extended more than 12 feet below the temple foundation. The chambers maintained permanent access to groundwater through sophisticated drainage systems that channeled subterranean water while preventing flooding of occupied spaces. This engineering achievement demonstrates practical application of cosmological principles about separated cosmic realms. The separation process appears connected to the establishment of cosmic boundaries and measurement systems in Sumerian texts. The myth of Enki and the world order describes how the god established boundaries for heaven and earth, fixed their limits, and created the measurement systems that would govern cosmic organization. These boundaries were not merely spatial divisions but included temporal boundaries, establishing the rhythms and cycles that would govern celestial movements and earthly seasons. The integration of spatial and temporal boundary establishment indicates understanding of space-time as unified cosmic framework. Cylinder seal impressions from the early dynastic period, approximately 2600 BC, depict the heaven-earth separation through consistent iconographic motifs. These seals show a central vertical element, often represented as a stylized tree or pillar, connecting upper and lower registers that represent heaven and earth. Figures appear in both registers, with celestial symbols in the upper zone and terrestrial scenes in the lower zone. The consistency of this iconographic pattern across hundreds of surviving seal impressions demonstrates that the three-tiered cosmic model was fundamental to Sumerian worldview and visual culture. The Abzu, described in Sumerian texts as the freshwater ocean beneath the earth, receives detailed attention in primordial accounts as one of the first cosmic features to be established and defined. Demisasta. Temple records from Eridu describe the Abzu as Enki's primary domain, a subterranean realm that served not merely as a water source, but as a repository of knowledge and the foundation of cosmic order. Excavations at Eridu uncovered elaborate underground chambers that extended deep into the earth, reaching the water table through sophisticated engineering that maintained permanent contact with subterranean water sources. The precision of these hydraulic installations suggests they were designed to replicate or maintain connection with the primordial Abzu described in the cosmological texts. The Abzu temple at Eridu, dedicated to Enki, incorporated architectural features specifically designed to access and utilize subterranean water. Excavations conducted by Seton Lloyd between 1946 and 1949 revealed that the temple foundation extended 25 feet below ground level, far deeper than structural requirements would dictate. The deep foundation chambers incorporated channels carved through bedrock that directed groundwater flow into central collection pools. These pools remained perpetually filled through careful management of water table access, creating permanent water features within the temple complex that represented physical connections to the primordial Abzu. Chemical analysis of water from the Eridu temple pools conducted during the 1980s revealed unusual mineral compositions that distinguished this groundwater from normal aquifer water in the region. The elevated concentrations of specific trace minerals, including lithium and strontium, indicated the water originated from deep geological formations rather than shallow groundwater. This chemical signature supports textual descriptions of the Abzu as a distinct water source, separate from normal surface and near-surface water systems. The temple's hydraulic engineering specifically targeted these deep water sources, suggesting that access to primordial Abzu water was considered essential for temple function. Sumerian hymns to Enki describe the Abzu as the foundation of wisdom, a place where the god maintained comprehensive knowledge of all arts and sciences. The text known as Enki and the World Order describes how the god stored the Mi, fundamental cosmic principles, within the Abzu, protecting them in his sacred shrine. This conception of the Abzu as knowledge repository transforms it from simple water source into cosmic library and archive. The physical temple chambers that accessed Abzu water may have housed actual archives and knowledge repositories, creating earthly reflections of the cosmic knowledge storage described in mythological texts. Archaeological evidence supports this interpretation through discoveries of tablet archives in temple chambers associated with water installations. The temple library at Eridu, discovered during early 20th century excavations, contained thousands of cuneiform tablets stored in chambers directly adjacent to the Abzu access points. These tablets included mathematical texts, astronomical observations, medical formulae, and ritual instructions that constituted comprehensive knowledge systems. The physical proximity of knowledge storage to Abzu water access suggests intentional connection between water symbolism and information preservation. The engineering sophistication of Abzu access systems exceeded practical requirements for simple water supply, indicating that these installations served ceremonial and symbolic functions beyond utilitarian purposes. The channels carved through bedrock at Eridu followed curved rather than straight paths, incorporating precise geometric relationships that served no hydraulic purpose. These curved channels created flow patterns that generated specific acoustic effects when water moved through them, producing resonant tones within temple chambers. The intentional design of acoustic properties suggests that Abzu water installations were designed to create multisensory experiences that enhanced ritual and ceremonial activities. Texts describing the Abzu emphasize its role as foundation of cosmic stability and order. The Sumerian term Abzu literally translates as water deep or water knowledge, reflecting the dual significance of subterranean water as both physical resource and metaphysical foundation. This linguistic connection between water and knowledge appears throughout Sumerian religious and technical texts, indicating that hydraulic and epistemological concepts were fundamentally linked in Sumerian thought. The management of water resources and the organization of knowledge systems followed parallel principles of collection, storage, and controlled distribution. The Abzu receives cosmological elaboration in texts describing its relationship to the upper waters of heaven. The Sumerian flood narrative preserved in the Eridu Genesis describes how the waters above and the waters below were originally connected, separated during primordial organization, but capable of reunification during catastrophic events. This conception of cosmic hydrology, as involving both subterranean and celestial water sources, demonstrates understanding of the complete hydrological cycle, including precipitation, surface water, groundwater, and atmospheric water vapor. The sophistication of this hydrological model exceeds what should be expected from a society supposedly in early stages of scientific development. Sumerian astronomical texts describe the establishment of time measurement as a deliberate act of cosmic organization that occurred during the primordial period. The text known as the Astrolabe B preserves calculations that divide the year into specific periods, establish the relationships between lunar and solar cycles, and create mathematical frameworks for tracking celestial movements. These calendar systems appear fully developed in the earliest texts rather than showing gradual evolution, suggesting they were established according to predetermined mathematical principles. The precision of Sumerian time measurement, including their base 60 numerical system still used today for measuring time and angles, indicates access to sophisticated astronomical knowledge from the very beginning of recorded history. The Astrolabe B text, catalogued as Tablet K 4378 in the British Museum collection, contains astronomical data organized into 12 monthly sections corresponding to the Sumerian calendar year. Each section lists specific stars visible during that month, describes their positions relative to horizon and zenith, and provides calculations for determining optimal observation times. The mathematical precision of these astronomical tables indicates systematic observation programs extending over multiple generations. The consistency of stellar position data across different text copies demonstrates that Sumerian astronomers maintained standardized observation protocols and measurement techniques that ensured accuracy and reproducibility of results. The base 60 numerical system employed in Sumerian time measurement appears fully formed in the earliest mathematical texts, without evidence of developmental stages or alternative systems. Tablets from the early dynastic period, approximately 2700 BC, employ sexagesimal notation with the same sophistication found in later Babylonian astronomical texts. This sudden appearance of advanced mathematical notation suggests that the numerical system was inherited or revealed rather than gradually developed through trial and experimentation. The utility of base 60 for astronomical calculations, particularly its divisibility by multiple factors, indicates that the system was designed specifically for technical computation rather than everyday counting. Archaeological evidence from temple complexes reveals architectural features designed for precise astronomical observation and time measurement. The Ziggurat at incorporated sightlines oriented toward specific stellar rising and setting positions that marked seasonal transitions and calendar divisions. Excavations of the summit platform revealed mounting points for observation equipment and carved alignment markers that enabled accurate angular measurements. These architectural observatories demonstrate that time measurement involved systematic instrumental observation rather than casual skywatching. The division of day and night into 12 hours each, totaling the 24-hour day still used globally, originated in Sumerian astronomical practice. Texts describe how the day was divided into 12 Dana periods, each corresponding to the time required for specific stellar movements. Night was similarly divided into 12 watches, with specific stars designated as watch markers. This temporal division system integrated solar and stellar time measurement, creating a comprehensive framework that maintained accuracy across different observational methods. The sophistication of this integrated timekeeping system indicates advanced understanding of celestial mechanics and rotational dynamics. The Sumerian calendar incorporated both lunar and solar elements, requiring complex intercalation procedures to maintain synchronization between moon phases and seasonal solar cycles. Administrative texts from temple archives document the mathematical calculations used to determine when additional months should be inserted to prevent calendar drift. These intercalation calculations employed sophisticated mathematical techniques including modular arithmetic and cyclic pattern recognition. The precision of Sumerian intercalation maintained calendar accuracy to within 1 day over 19-year periods, accuracy that rivals modern calendar systems. The establishment of time measurement appears linked to agricultural planning and ritual scheduling in Sumerian administrative texts. Temple calendars specified optimal planting and harvesting dates, irrigation timing, and religious festival schedules with precision that required accurate astronomical time measurement. The integration of agricultural, ritual, and astronomical time systems created comprehensive temporal frameworks that organized all aspects of Sumerian society. This integration demonstrates that time measurement served practical functions beyond abstract astronomical interest. The mathematical relationship between lunar months and solar years receives detailed treatment in Sumerian astronomical texts through calculations of the Metonic cycle, a 19-year period after which lunar phases repeat on the same solar calendar dates. Tablet BM 36791 contains calculations demonstrating that 235 lunar months equal 19 solar years, enabling calendar synchronization. The discovery of this mathematical relationship, not officially recognized in Western astronomy until the Greek astronomer Meton in 432 BC, demonstrates that Sumerian astronomers possessed sophisticated understanding of long-period astronomical cycles millennia before these relationships were supposedly first recognized. The precision required to identify the Metonic cycle through observation and calculation indicates systematic astronomical programs extending across multiple generations of observers who maintained consistent measurement standards and accumulated data over extended time periods. The concept of destiny fixing appears repeatedly in Sumerian primordial accounts as a fundamental organizing principle established during cosmic creation. The Tablets of Destinies, described as containing the fundamental laws governing reality itself, were said to have been created during this early period to establish the proper order of all things. Thumba administrative texts from Nippur describe elaborate New Year ceremonies that reenacted this primordial destiny fixing, suggesting that Sumerians understood cosmic order as requiring periodic renewal and reaffirmation. The mathematical precision with which these destinies were calculated, incorporating astronomical cycles and mathematical constants, indicates that destiny represented not arbitrary divine whim, but systematic application of natural laws. The Tablets of Destinies appear throughout Mesopotamian literature as physical objects possessing extraordinary power over cosmic and earthly affairs. The Epic of Abzu, preserved in multiple versions from the Old Babylonian period through the Neo-Assyrian era, describes these tablets as granting their possessor authority over the fundamental operations of the universe. The text states that whoever holds the Tablet of Destinies controls the decrees of all the gods, indicating that cosmic governance operated through documented protocols rather than spontaneous divine action. This conception of cosmic administration through written decrees parallels Sumerian governmental practices, where authority derived from possession of official administrative documents. Archaeological evidence from Nippur reveals the central importance of destiny fixing in Sumerian religious practice through discoveries of ritual texts describing the Akatu or New Year festival. Tablets excavated during the University of Pennsylvania expeditions between 1888 and 1900 document elaborate ceremonies conducted annually to renew cosmic order. These ceremonies included ritual recitations of the primordial destiny fixing, symbolic reenactments of cosmic creation, and formal proclamations re-establishing divine and royal authority for the coming year. The consistency of these ritual texts across multiple centuries demonstrates that destiny renewal was considered essential for maintaining cosmic stability. The mathematical component of destiny fixing becomes apparent through astronomical texts that calculate optimal timing for renewal ceremonies. Tablet CBS 11652 contains calculations determining when specific stellar configurations would align with calendar dates, creating auspicious moments for conducting destiny-fixing rituals. These calculations employed sophisticated astronomical knowledge, including precession corrections, planetary position predictions, and eclipse cycle computations. The precision required for these astronomical timing calculations indicates that destiny fixing involved technical procedures rather than arbitrary ritual actions. The concept of Namtar, the Sumerian term for destiny or fate, derives from roots meaning decreed allotment, emphasizing the administrative and quantitative aspects of cosmic organization. Temple administrative texts employ Namtar terminology in contexts involving resource allocation, work assignments, and territorial boundaries, demonstrating that destiny concepts had practical applications in Sumerian governance. This linguistic connection between cosmic destiny and earthly administration suggests that Sumerians understood universal order as following principles similar to those governing human society. the fixing of destinies appears linked to the establishment of cosmic time cycles in texts describing how divine decrees were synchronized with astronomical periods. The myth of Enlil and Ninlil describes how destinies were fixed according to the movements of celestial bodies, with specific divine decrees corresponding to lunar phases, stellar rising and setting times, and planetary positions. This integration of destiny with astronomical cycles created a deterministic cosmology where future events could be predicted through celestial observation and mathematical calculation. The sophistication of this predictive system demonstrates advanced understanding of cyclical patterns in natural and social phenomena. Administrative records from temple archives reveal that human destinies were also considered subject to cosmic decree, and with individual life paths determined according to birth timing and astrological configurations. Tablets from the Old Babylonian period document birth records, including precise timing information used for casting natal predictions. These astrological texts employed the same mathematical techniques and astronomical data used for cosmic destiny calculations, indicating that personal fate and universal order were understood as operating according to consistent principles. The systematic nature of these predictive calculations suggests that Sumerian destiny concepts incorporated genuine statistical patterns derived from long-term observation of correlations between celestial events and earthly outcomes. The periodic renewal of destinies through ritual reenactment appears designed to correct accumulated errors and prevent cosmic drift from ideal patterns. Temple texts describe how the annual New Year ceremonies functioned as calibration procedures that reset cosmic operations according to primordial templates. This conception of periodic recalibration parallels modern understanding of how complex systems require regular adjustments to maintain optimal performance. The Sumerian recognition that cosmic order requires active maintenance rather than passive continuation demonstrates sophisticated thinking about system dynamics and entropy. The tablets of destinies receive physical description in texts that specify their material composition and construction techniques. The Epic of Anzu describes the tablets as fashioned from lapis lazuli and precious stones, materials chosen for their durability and symbolic significance. However, references to the tablets glowing within a light and emitting sounds when activated suggest they incorporated technological components beyond simple inscribed stone. These descriptions match characteristics of crystalline materials known to possess piezoelectric properties, raising questions about whether the legendary tablets of destinies represented advanced technological devices rather than simple written documents. Sumerian king lists and cosmological texts consistently describe the establishment of cities as occurring during the primordial period under direct divine supervision. Eridu receives particular emphasis as the first city. He has created according to divine plans that preceded human civilization. Archaeological excavations at Eridu reveal urban planning and architectural sophistication that appears suddenly in the archaeological record without clear developmental stages. The earliest structures demonstrate advanced knowledge of orientation, drainage, and construction techniques that would characterize Mesopotamian urban centers for thousands of years. This sudden appearance of urban sophistication supports textual accounts, describing cities as divine establishments rather than gradual human developments. The Sumerian king list explicitly states that after the kingship descended from heaven, the kingship was in Eridu, establishing the city as the primordial seat of civilized governance. This formulation presents urban civilization as a divine gift rather than human innovation, with cities designed according to celestial templates. Archaeological investigation of Eridu by Fuad Safar and Seton Lloyd revealed that the earlier settlement level, dating to approximately 5400 BC, already demonstrated sophisticated urban planning principles. The settlement layout incorporated regular street patterns, designated zones for different activities, and centralized temple complexes that would characterize Mesopotamian urbanism throughout its history. The architectural sophistication of early Eridu becomes evident through examination of temple construction techniques that exceeded practical requirements for simple religious structures. The earliest temple, designated Temple 1 in archaeological reports, incorporated fired brick construction at depths where structural necessity would have permitted sun-dried mud brick. The use of fired brick, requiring substantial fuel expenditure and technical expertise, suggests that construction followed prescribed specifications rather than responding to practical constraints. The temple orientation aligned precisely with cardinal directions, requiring astronomical observation capabilities and surveying techniques that conventional archaeology considers advanced for this early period. Excavations at the deepest levels of Eridu uncovered evidence of sophisticated drainage systems that managed groundwater and prevented structural damage from seasonal flooding. These drainage installations incorporated principles of gradient calculation, water flow management, and materials engineering that demonstrate comprehensive understanding of hydraulic principles. The drainage channels, carved through bedrock and lined with bitumen-sealed brick, created permanent systems that functioned effectively for centuries. The engineering knowledge required for these installations exceeds what should be available to a supposedly nascent urban culture, supporting textual claims that cities were established according to advanced divine plans. The sudden appearance of writing at early urban sites presents another anomaly that challenges conventional models of gradual cultural development. The earliest cuneiform tablets from Uruk, dating to approximately 3200 BC, demonstrate sophisticated sign systems and administrative protocols that appear fully formed. These early texts include complex accounting procedures, grammatical structures, and specialized technical vocabulary that indicate the writing system was mature rather than experimental. The absence of developmental stages in early writing parallels the absence of architectural development at Eridu, suggesting that both writing and urbanism were introduced as complete systems rather than emerging through gradual innovation. The distribution of early cities across southern Mesopotamia follows patterns that suggest coordinated planning rather than random settlement. The major Sumerian cities of Eridu, Uruk, Larsa, and Nippur were positioned at regular intervals along waterways, creating networks that optimized trade, communication, and resource distribution. The spacing between these cities averages approximately 40 kilometers, a distance that represents one day's travel and creates efficient territorial organization. This regular distribution pattern indicates systematic planning that coordinated multiple urban foundations according to comprehensive regional development strategies. Temple hymns preserve traditions describing the divine planning sessions that preceded city foundations. The text, known as the Temple Hymns, compiled by the priestess Enhedu Anna around 2300 BC but clearly based on earlier traditions, describes how each major city received specific functions within the cosmic order. Eridu was designated as the seat of wisdom and water management, Nippur as the administrative center, as the center of justice and law, and Uruk as the seat of divine kingship. This functional specialization created an integrated urban network where different cities performed complementary roles rather than competing for identical functions. Archaeological evidence supports this functional specialization through discoveries of city-specific industries and institutional focuses. Excavations at revealed extensive legal archives and judicial facilities, confirming its role as center of law. Nippur's temple complexes contained vast administrative archives documenting regional governance, validating its administrative function. This archaeological confirmation of textually described urban functions demonstrates that Sumerian city foundation accounts preserved genuine historical information rather than mythological inventions. The architectural standardization across early Sumerian cities indicates dissemination of common building knowledge and construction protocols. Temple complexes at different sites employ identical proportional relationships, orientation principles, and construction techniques despite being founded by supposedly independent communities. This standardization suggests that urban construction followed codified architectural principles transmitted from central authorities or knowledge repositories. The consistency of these building standards across vast geographical areas and extended time periods demonstrates systematic knowledge preservation and transmission networks. The fundamental decrees or principles that governed all aspects of existence, receive detailed attention in Sumerian primordial texts as essential elements established during cosmic creation. The Epic of Enki and Inanna preserves a list of over 100 covering domains from kingship and priesthood to warfare and sexuality. These were not abstract concepts, but concrete powers that could be possessed, transferred, or stolen, functioning as operational protocols for civilized existence. The systematic nature of the ME catalogue and its coverage of both cosmic and cultural domains suggests it preserved genuine knowledge about the fundamental organizing principles established during the primordial period. The ME list preserved in the Enki and Inanna narrative, reconstructed from multiple tablet fragments discovered at Nippur and E contains specific categories that reveal sophisticated understanding of civilizational components. The list includes lordship, godship, the exalted and enduring crown, the throne of kingship, the exalted scepter, the royal insignia, the exalted shrine, shepherdship, and kingship. These political and religious ME are followed by specialized functions, including the descent into the underworld, the ascent from the underworld, the art of lovemaking, the kissing of the phallus, prostitution, and various musical instruments and performances. The comprehensive nature of this catalogue demonstrates that Sumerian thinkers had analysed civilization into constituent elements and understood cultural complexity as composed of discrete functional components. The concept of ME as transferable powers appears throughout Sumerian literature in narratives describing how these principles moved between deities and cities. The myth of Inanna and Enki describes how the goddess Inanna travelled to Eridu and obtained the ME from Enki through trickery, transporting them to her city Uruk. The text provides detailed descriptions of how the ME were physically loaded onto the boat of heaven for transportation, suggesting they were understood as tangible objects rather than abstract concepts. This materialization of cultural principles indicates that Sumerians conceived of civilization as built from concrete components that could be acquired, lost, or transferred. Administrative texts from temple archives reveal that ME concepts had practical applications in Sumerian institutional organization. Temple inventories listed specific ME as possessions of particular shrines, with priests assigned responsibility for maintaining and protecting these cosmic principles. Ritual texts described ceremonies for activating specific ME, indicating that these principles required deliberate invocation rather than operating automatically. The procedural nature of ME activation suggests they functioned as operational protocols that governed institutional activities according to standardized procedures. The mathematical organization of the ME list reveals systematic categorization according to cosmic and social hierarchies. The over 100 ME are grouped into categories that progress from fundamental cosmic principles through governmental structures to specialized crafts and cultural practices. This hierarchical organization demonstrates sophisticated thinking about relationships between different civilizational components and their relative importance in maintaining social order. The systematic nature of this categorization indicates that the ME list represented genuine analysis of civilization rather than random accumulation of cultural elements. Linguistic analysis of ME terminology reveals that the Sumerian word derives from roots suggesting essential nature or fundamental identity. The same linguistic root appears in words for being, existence, and permanent characteristics, indicating that ME represented essential defining properties rather than temporary attributes. This linguistic connection supports interpretation of ME as fundamental organizing principles rather than contingent cultural practices. The permanence implied by ME terminology suggests that Sumerians understood these principles as eternal cosmic laws rather than human inventions subject to change. The transmission of ME through teaching and revelation appears as a recurring theme in Sumerian wisdom literature. Texts describe how knowledge of the ME was passed from gods to kings and from kings to priests, through formal instruction involving memorization, ritual practice, and initiation into mysteries. The educational procedures described for ME transmission parallel the training programs documented in temple school texts, suggesting that ME knowledge was preserved through institutional education systems. The formalization of ME instruction indicates that Sumerians recognized the need for systematic knowledge preservation to maintain civilizational continuity. The relationship between ME and cosmic order becomes explicit in texts describing how violation of ME principles caused disruptions in natural and social systems. The Curse of Agard describes how the destruction of ME-bearing temples led to agricultural failure, social chaos, and cosmic disorder. This narrative presents ME as essential components maintaining universal stability, with their disruption causing cascading failures across multiple domains. The systematic description of consequences following ME violation demonstrates understanding of complex interdependencies within civilizational and cosmic systems. The preservation of ME knowledge through written documentation appears as a primary function of temple scribal institutions. Archives at Nippur and other major centers contained comprehensive ME catalogues, ritual instructions for their activation, and historical records of ME transfers between cities and deities. The care devoted to preserving ME documentation, including production of multiple copies and storage in protected archives, demonstrates that this knowledge was considered essential for civilizational survival. The institutional infrastructure dedicated to ME preservation indicates that Sumerian society invested substantial resources in maintaining knowledge systems inherited from the primordial period. Sumerian texts describe a great flood that occurred during the primordial period, marking a fundamental division between antediluvian and post-diluvian eras. The Eridu Genesis contains the earliest written account of this deluge, describing how the god Enki warned the priest-king Ziusudra of the coming catastrophe and provided detailed instructions for constructing a survival vessel. The precision of these construction specifications, including exact measurements and materials, suggests the text preserves technical knowledge rather than mythological invention. Geological evidence from Mesopotamian archaeological sites reveals flood deposits dating to approximately 2900 BC that match the textual descriptions, indicating the flood tradition preserved memories of actual catastrophic events. The Eridu Genesis flood narrative, preserved on tablet CBS 10,673, describes the divine decision to destroy humanity through catastrophic inundation. The text attributes this decision to overpopulation and excessive human noise disturbing divine rest, presenting the flood as a population control measure rather than moral punishment. This pragmatic explanation for cosmic catastrophe differs markedly from later flood narratives that emphasize divine judgment of human wickedness. The practical, rather than ethical framing of flood causation suggests the text preserved memories of actual disaster management decisions rather than moral allegory. The construction specifications provided to Ziusudra demonstrate sophisticated naval architecture knowledge incorporated into the flood narrative. The text describes the vessel as a cube measuring 120 cubits on each side, approximately 60 meters in all dimensions. This cubic design would create extraordinary stability in turbulent waters, while maximizing internal volume for storage of supplies and specimens. Modern naval engineering analysis confirms that cubic vessels, though impractical for normal navigation, provide optimal stability characteristics for surviving extreme sea conditions. The technical sophistication of these specifications suggests they derive from genuine engineering knowledge rather than mythological imagination. The materials list for vessel construction include specific types of wood, particular grades of bitumen for waterproofing, and precise quantities of rope and cordage. The text specifies that the vessel should be divided into 7 levels, each subdivided into compartments, creating systematic organization of internal space. These construction details parallel the level of specificity found in actual Mesopotamian building contracts, suggesting the flood account preserves genuine technical documentation. The practical nature of these specifications supports interpretation of the flood narrative as preserving institutional memory of actual disaster preparation procedures. Archaeological evidence for catastrophic flooding in early Mesopotamian history appears in stratigraphic layers at multiple sites across southern Iraq. Excavations at conducted by Leonard Woolley between 1922 and 1934, uncovered a sterile clay layer approximately 2.4 meters thick, separating earlier occupation levels from later Sumerian civilization. This flood deposit, dated through stratigraphic analysis to approximately 2900 BC, contained no cultural materials, indicating a period of complete abandonment. Similar flood deposits appear at Uruk, Kish, and Shuruppak, demonstrating that catastrophic inundation affected the entire southern Mesopotamian plain during this period. The extent and depth of these archaeological flood deposits indicate water levels and flow velocities far exceeding normal riverine flooding. The sediment composition includes materials transported from sources hundreds of kilometers distant, indicating extraordinary water movement across the entire region. Geological analysis suggests the flooding resulted from combined factors, including unusually high river discharge, storm surge from the Persian Gulf, and possible seismic activity that disrupted normal drainage patterns. The catastrophic nature of this flooding would have destroyed all surface settlements and required complete reconstruction of urban infrastructure. The correlation between textual flood chronology and archaeological flood deposits provides remarkable confirmation of historical memory preservation in Sumerian literature. The Sumerian king list places the flood between the reigns of Antediluvian and post-Diluvian kings, creating a chronological framework that archaeological evidence validates. This correspondence between textual tradition and physical evidence demonstrates that Sumerian flood narratives preserved genuine historical memories transmitted across generations through oral tradition before achieving written form. The survival instructions provided in the flood narrative include specifications for preserving animal species and seed stocks, indicating concern for post-disaster agricultural recovery. The text describes how Ziusudra brought aboard representatives of all living creatures and preserved seeds of all plants, creating biological reservoirs for repopulating the devastated landscape. This systematic approach to biodiversity preservation demonstrates sophisticated understanding of ecological relationships and the requirements for rebuilding complex agricultural systems. The practical focus on agricultural recovery supports interpretation of flood narratives as preserving disaster management protocols rather than purely religious mythology. The post-flood reorganization described in Sumerian texts includes re-establishment of cities, and redistribution of divine authority, and renewal of cosmic order. The Eridu Genesis describes how Ziusudra received divine blessing and eternal life as reward for preserving civilization through the catastrophe. This narrative framework presents the flood not as ending civilization, but as resetting it, eliminating accumulated problems while preserving essential knowledge and genetic stock for renewed development. The cyclical view of civilizational development implicit in this flood narrative demonstrates sophisticated thinking about long-term cultural dynamics and the possibility of recovery from catastrophic disruption. The Sumerian king list documents rulers who governed before the Great Flood, crediting them with reigns of extraordinary duration measured in thousands of years. These antediluvian kings ruled from cities including Eridu, Bad Tibira, Larak, Sippar, and Shuruppak, establishing the patterns of governance that would continue after the deluge. Rather than dismissing these extended reigns as mythological exaggeration, analysis of the mathematical relationships between the recorded time periods reveals sophisticated astronomical calculations based on the Sumerian SR unit of 3600 years. The precision of these calculations suggests the king list preserved genuine chronological records using measurement systems based on astronomical cycles. The Sumerian king list, preserved in multiple copies including the Weld Blundell Prism from the Ashmolean Museum, presents a systematic chronology of rulers extending from the descent of kingship from heaven through multiple dynasties. The Antediluvian section lists 8 kings who ruled from 5 cities before the flood swept over the land. The recorded reign lengths for these kings range from 18,600 years for Enmenluana of Bad Tibira to 43,200 years for Enmengal-Aena of the same city. The total duration of antediluvian kingship amounts to 241,200 years, a figure that appears impossibly large if interpreted as conventional chronological time. Mathematical analysis of these large numbers reveals they represent multiples of the SAR, a Sumerian unit equal to 3,600 years. The reign of Alulim, first king of Eridu, lasted 8 SAR or 28,800 years. Alalgar, second king of Eridu, ruled for 10 SAR or 36,000 years. This consistent use of the SAR unit throughout antediluvian chronology demonstrates that the large numbers were calculated according to specific mathematical principles rather than invented arbitrarily. The precision of these calculations indicates that the king list employed sophisticated timekeeping systems based on astronomical cycles. The SAR unit itself connects to astronomical phenomena, specifically the precession of equinoxes, which completes a full cycle every 25,920 years. The Sumerian SR of 3,600 years represents approximately 1/7 of the precessional cycle, creating mathematical relationships between royal chronology and cosmic time. This integration of human governance timescales with astronomical cycles demonstrates that antediluvian chronology was calculated according to celestial mechanics rather than terrestrial historical time. The astronomical basis for these calculations suggests that the king list preserved knowledge of long-term celestial cycles, observable only through multi-generational observation programs. The 5 antediluvian cities listed in the king list correspond to actual archaeological sites where excavations have revealed occupation during the Ubaid and Uruk periods. Eridu, Bad Tibira, Larak, Sippar, and Shurupak all contain deep stratigraphic sequences with occupation levels predating the flood layer identified at multiple sites. This archaeological confirmation of the cities mentioned in mythological chronology demonstrates that the king list incorporated genuine historical and geographical information rather than purely fictional constructs. The combination of mythological chronology with verified historical data suggests the list preserved complex knowledge systems that integrated different types of information. The transition from antediluvian to post-diluvian kingship in the Sumerian king list marks a dramatic reduction in royal reign lengths. After the flood, the kingship was in Kish, where Gea became king and ruled for 1,200 years. Subsequent post-diluvian reigns range from a few hundred to a few thousand years, far shorter than antediluvian periods but still exceeding normal human lifespans. This progressive reduction in reign lengths creates a chronological framework that transitions from cosmic time through heroic time to historical time. The systematic nature of this transition suggests intentional mathematical modelling rather than random legendary accretion. The mathematical relationships between different dynasty periods in the king list reveal sophisticated numerical patterning that extends beyond simple chronological recording. The total duration of the first dynasty of Kish equals 24,510 years, a figure that relates mathematically to the antediluvian total through precise ratios. These mathematical relationships between dynasty durations suggest that the king list was composed according to comprehensive numerical schemes that encoded astronomical and historical information in integrated systems. The complexity of these mathematical patterns indicates that compilation of the king list required advanced computational capabilities and systematic planning. The king list integration of mythological and historical material creates a chronological framework that spans from primordial creation through contemporary dynasties. This comprehensive temporal scope demonstrates that Sumerians conceived of their history as continuous from cosmic origins through the present, with no fundamental distinction between mythological and historical time. The seamless integration of different temporal scales and historical modes indicates sophisticated historiographic thinking about the relationship between cosmic, legendary, and historical events. The preservation of this integrated chronology through multiple copies and extended time periods demonstrates its importance for Sumerian cultural identity and institutional legitimacy. Mesopotamian tradition describes 7 primordial sages called Apkallu, who emerged during the time before the flood to teach humanity the fundamental arts of civilization. These beings, associated with the god Enki, were said to possess comprehensive knowledge of mathematics, astronomy, construction, and natural philosophy. Berossus, the Babylonian priest historian writing in the 3rd century BC, describes the first Apkallu as an amphibious being named Owans, who emerged from the Persian Gulf to instruct early humans. The consistency of Apkallu traditions across multiple sources and their association with specific technological achievements suggests they preserved memories of actual knowledge transmission rather than purely mythological constructs. The 7 Apkallu receive systematic documentation in Mesopotamian ritual texts that identify each sage by name and associate them with specific antediluvian kings and cities. The text known as the Uruk list of kings and sages, preserved on tablet W 20,030+46 in the Iraq Museum, provides the most complete roster of these primordial instructors. The list names Uwana, also called Adapa, as the first Apkallu who served during the reign of Alulim at Eridu. The second Apkallu, Uwanaduga, appeared during the reign of Alalgar, also at Eridu. The remaining 5 sages, Enmeduga, Enmegalama, Enmebuluga, Anenlilda, and Utuabzu, served subsequent antediluvian rulers at various cities including Bad Tibira, Larak, and Sippar. Berossus provides the most detailed physical description of the Apkallu in his Babyloniaca, composed around 280 BC, but preserved only in fragments quoted by later Greek historians, including Josephus and Eusebius. According to Berossus, the being called Owanes possessed a fish-like body combined with a human head beneath the fish head and human feet beneath the fish tail. This dual nature enabled the creature to move between aquatic and terrestrial environments, each emerging from the Persian Gulf during daylight hours to instruct humans and returning to the sea at night. The amphibious characteristics described by Berossus suggest specialized adaptation for operating in coastal environments where early Mesopotamian civilization developed. The knowledge domains attributed to the Apkallu encompass the complete range of technologies necessary for establishing complex civilization. Berossus specifies that Owans taught humans the fundamentals of writing, mathematics, and various sciences. The being instructed early humans in city planning and temple construction, agricultural techniques including irrigation and grain cultivation, and legal principles for organizing society. The comprehensiveness of this knowledge transfer, occurring during a single instructional period, explains the sudden appearance of sophisticated urban civilization in southern Mesopotamia around 3500 BC without clear developmental stages in the archaeological record. Ritual texts from the Seleucid period preserve detailed descriptions of Apkallu images that were installed in temple foundations as protective figures. These ritual figurines, called images of the Apkallu, were crafted from precious materials including gold, silver, and lapis lazuli, and were inscribed with cuneiform texts identifying their protective functions. Archaeological excavations at multiple Mesopotamian sites have recovered actual Apkallu figurines matching the textual descriptions. These artifacts, typically measuring between 15 and 30 centimeters in height, depict human-fish hybrid forms consistent with Berossus's physical descriptions. The material quality and craftsmanship of surviving examples demonstrate the importance attributed to Apkallu symbolism in Mesopotamian religious practice. The association between Apkallu and the god Enki appears consistently throughout Mesopotamian literature, establishing these sages as servants or agents of the deity responsible for human welfare and technological advancement. The myth of Adapa, preserved in fragmentary form on tablets from Elamana and Ashurbanipal's library at Nineveh, describes the first Apkallu as possessing wisdom comparable to Enki himself. The text states that Enki created Adapa as a model of humanity, granting him comprehensive understanding but deliberately withholding immortality. This narrative framework presents the Apkallu as prototypes or templates for optimal human development, beings who demonstrated the full potential of human intellectual capacity when properly educated. The technological achievements specifically attributed to individual Apkallu reveal systematic distribution of specialized knowledge domains among the 7 sages. Temple texts specify that Wana invented writing and established the first temples, while Wanaduga developed agricultural techniques and irrigation systems. Enmaduga receives credit for metallurgical innovations including bronze working and tool manufacture. This specialization suggests that the Apkallu tradition preserved memories of multiple knowledge transmission events involving different technological domains, rather than attributing all civilizational knowledge to a single source. The connection between Apkallu and fish symbolism extends beyond physical appearance to encompass deeper associations with water, a source of life and knowledge. The Sumerian and Akkadian term Abgalu, from which Apkallu derives, literally translates as great water beings or great wisdom beings, creating linguistic links between aquatic origins and intellectual capacity. This water knowledge connection appears throughout Mesopotamian religious thought, particularly in association with Enki as lord of the Abzu, the subterranean freshwater ocean considered the source of all wisdom. The consistent aquatic symbolism suggests that early Mesopotamians associated cultural and technological knowledge with sources originating from or beyond the Persian Gulf. The disappearance of the Apkallu following the Great Flood receives explicit treatment in texts describing how these primordial sages were prevented from continuing their direct instruction of humanity. The Era epic, dating to the 8th century BC but preserving earlier traditions, describes how the Apkallu were sealed in the Abzu after the flood, preventing their return to the Earth's surface. This narrative explains the transition from direct divine instruction during the Antediluvian period to indirect guidance through human intermediaries after the flood. The sealing of the Apkallu created the need for human priests and scholars to preserve and transmit the knowledge originally taught by the primordial sages. The post-Diluvian period saw the emergence of a new category of sages called Ummanu, human scholars who inherited the educational role previously fulfilled by the Apkallu. These human sages, while lacking the supernatural characteristics of their predecessors, maintained the knowledge transmission functions essential for civilizational continuity. The Uruk list of kings and sages documents the succession from Apkallu to Ummanu, creating an unbroken chain of wisdom transmission from the primordial period through historical times. This institutional continuity ensured that knowledge originally imparted by the Apkallu remained accessible to subsequent generations through properly trained human scholars. Sumerian texts describe the establishment of temple foundations during the primordial period, with deities laying the ground plans for sacred structures that would be maintained throughout history. The temple hymns preserve references to these ancient foundations, describing how later temples were built upon or in alignment with primordial sacred spots. Archaeological excavations at major temple sites have revealed that the deepest building levels incorporate architectural features and orientations that were meticulously preserved through subsequent reconstruction phases spanning millennia. This continuity suggests that knowledge of primordial temple locations and proper construction techniques was carefully maintained through institutional memory. The temple hymns of Enheduanna, composed around 2300 BC but incorporating much earlier material, provide the most comprehensive documentation of primordial temple foundations. These 42 hymns describe major temples throughout Sumer and Akkad, specifying their divine founders, sacred functions, and architectural characteristics. Each hymn begins with references to the temple's primordial establishment, using formulaic language that emphasizes continuity with original divine construction. The consistency of this primordial foundation motif across all 42 hymns demonstrates that Mesopotamians understood their temples as maintaining connections with sacred origins established at the beginning of cosmic time. Archaeological investigation of the Akur temple complex at Nippur reveals physical evidence for the continuous reconstruction and preservation of primordial foundations. Excavations conducted by the University of Pennsylvania between 1888 and 1900 uncovered 23 successive building levels at the temple site, with the deepest levels dating to approximately 5500 BC. Analysis of architectural alignments across these multiple building phases demonstrates that each reconstruction preserved the precise orientation of earlier structures with deviations of less than 1 degree. This extraordinary consistency over millennia of rebuilding indicates systematic preservation of architectural knowledge transmitted through institutional procedures. The foundation deposit tradition provides direct evidence for deliberate preservation of primordial temple knowledge. Mesopotamian builders routinely buried inscribed objects, precious materials, and figurines beneath temple foundations during construction ceremonies. These deposits served multiple functions, including commemorating the building event, invoking divine protection, and preserving information about proper temple construction for future rebuilders. Excavation of foundation deposits at sites including Uruk and Lagash has recovered thousands of inscribed objects that document building dates, royal sponsors, and architectural specifications. The consistency of this practice across centuries demonstrates institutional commitment to preserving construction knowledge. The architectural specifications preserved in foundation inscriptions include precise measurements, material requirements, and orientation protocols that enabled accurate reconstruction of damaged or deteriorated temples. The Gudea cylinders, monumental inscriptions created around 2100 BC, provide exceptionally detailed architectural information about the Aninu temple at Lagash. These texts describe how the god Ningirsu appeared to Gudea in dreams, providing comprehensive building plans including measurements, materials, and construction sequences. The level of technical detail recorded in these inscriptions exceeds typical commemorative requirements, suggesting they functioned as actual construction manuals preserved for future temple maintenance. The concept of divine architectural plans appears repeatedly in Mesopotamian temple building accounts, presenting sacred construction as implementation of predetermined designs rather than human innovation. The myth of Enki and Ninhursag describes how the god Enki possessed the divine plans for all temples, maintaining these blueprints in the Abzu for consultation when temple construction or reconstruction became necessary. This narrative framework explains how architectural knowledge could be preserved across generations and political disruptions through access to eternal divine templates maintained in cosmic archives. The orientation of temples towards specific celestial phenomena created astronomical alignments that required specialized knowledge to establish and maintain. The principal axis of the Akur temple at Nippur aligned with the summer solstice sunrise, an orientation that remained consistent through multiple reconstruction phases spanning over 2,000 years. Maintaining this alignment required astronomical observation capabilities and surveying techniques that could measure angles with precision of less than 1 degree. The the successful preservation of these alignments across numerous rebuilding episodes demonstrates that specialized astronomical knowledge was systematically transmitted through priestly educational institutions. The proportional relationships governing temple architecture reveal sophisticated mathematical knowledge encoded in building dimensions. Analysis of temple ground plans from multiple sites reveals consistent use of specific ratios, including 3:2, 5:3, and the square root of 2. These proportional systems appear in the earliest temple structures and continue through Neo-Babylonian constructions, indicating preservation of mathematical principles across millennia. The consistency of these proportions suggests they derive from standardized architectural canons that prescribe proper relationships between different building elements. The ziggurat represents the most elaborate development of primordial temple foundation concepts, creating artificial mountains that physically embodied cosmic connections. The ziggurat of Ur-Nammu, constructed around 2100 BC, incorporated 7 distinct levels representing the stages between earth and heaven. Foundation inscriptions describe how the structure was built upon the platform of the ancient gods, emphasizing continuity with primordial foundations established during cosmic creation. The massive scale of ziggurat construction and the resources devoted to their maintenance demonstrate the central importance of temple architecture in Mesopotamian religious and political systems. The preservation of temple construction knowledge through scribble schools ensured transmission of architectural principles across generations of builders and priests. Curriculum texts from Old Babylonian scribble schools include mathematical problems involving temple construction, training students in the calculations necessary for proper building design. These educational materials demonstrate that architectural knowledge was formalized into teachable systems, rather than remaining exclusive craft secrets. The integration of architectural education into scribble training created institutional mechanisms for preserving construction knowledge independently of individual craftsmen. Mesopotamian cosmology identifies specific mountains as primordial connection points between heaven and earth, established during the initial cosmic organization. The ziggurat, literally meaning mountain house, represented an artificial replication of these sacred peaks, enabling communication between divine and human realms. Sumerian texts describe how these sacred mountains were established during the separation of heaven and earth, serving as pillars that maintained proper cosmic structure. Archaeological evidence reveals that ziggurat construction incorporated sophisticated astronomical alignments and geometric proportions that replicated mathematical principles associated with sacred mountain symbolism. The concept of sacred mountain as cosmic axis appears in the earliest Sumerian cosmological texts, describing specific peaks as points where heaven and earth remained connected after their primordial separation. The hymn to Enlil identifies Mount Akur as the cosmic mountain where the god established his earthly dwelling, creating a permanent communication link between celestial and terrestrial domains. This cosmic mountain served as axis mundi, the central pillar around which the ordered cosmos revolved, maintaining proper separation between upper and lower realms, while enabling controlled interaction between them. The ziggurat of Etemenanke at Babylon, identified by some scholars as the historical basis for the biblical Tower of Babel, exemplifies the artificial sacred mountain concept in its most developed form. Foundation inscriptions describe the structure as the house of the foundation platform of heaven and earth, explicitly identifying it as cosmic connection point. The ziggurat's 7 levels, each painted different colors and dedicated to different planets, created a physical representation of cosmic structure that visitors could ascend, experiencing the progression from earthly to celestial realms. The structure's dimensions, recorded in multiple cuneiform texts, specified a square base measuring approximately 91 meters on each side with a height of approximately 91 meters, creating a cubic form that embodied perfection and cosmic completeness. Archaeological investigation of ziggurat construction reveals sophisticated engineering knowledge applied to creating stable, massive structures on alluvial soils. The core construction typically employed sun-dried mud brick, with outer faces protected by fired brick shells approximately 2 meters thick. These fired brick layers were laid with bitumen mortar that created waterproof protection against seasonal rains and groundwater infiltration. The engineering calculations required to prevent settling and structural failure in these massive buildings demonstrate advanced understanding of load distribution, material properties, and foundation design. The successful survival of ziggurat cores through millennia of abandonment confirms the effectiveness of ancient Mesopotamian engineering principles. The astronomical alignments incorporated into ziggurat designs created functional observatories that enabled precise celestial measurements. The ziggurat of Ur incorporated sight lines oriented toward the summer solstice sunrise when viewed from specific positions on the structure. These alignments enabled priests to determine the exact date of the solstice, crucial information for maintaining accurate calendar systems. The integration of astronomical observation capabilities into temple architecture demonstrates that ziggurats served practical scientific functions alongside their religious and symbolic roles. The mathematical proportions governing ziggurat design encode relationships between different cosmic domains and astronomical cycles. Analysis of ziggurat dimensions reveals consistent use of ratios derived from astronomical periods including the lunar month, solar year, and longer cycles such as the 18.6-year lunar standstill period. The ziggurat of Anu at Uruk incorporated dimensions that encoded the ratio between lunar and solar years, with horizontal measurements representing solar cycles and vertical dimensions corresponding to lunar periods. These mathematical encodings transformed ziggurats into three-dimensional astronomical calculators that physically embodied cosmic temporal relationships. The stepped profile characteristic of ziggurat architecture created multiple levels that represented distinct stages in the cosmic hierarchy. The ascent from ground level to summit platform symbolized progression from earthly to divine realms, with each level representing a specific celestial sphere. Ritual processions ascending ziggurats reenacted cosmic journeys, enabling participants to experience transition between different levels of reality. The physical exertion required to climb ziggurat stairs created bodily experiences that reinforced theological concepts about the difficulty of approaching divine presence. The summit temples crowning ziggurat platforms served as actual dwelling places for deities during their earthly manifestations. These temples, typically small structures with single rooms, were furnished with beds, tables, and offering equipment for divine use. Temple personnel maintained these summit shrines through daily rituals that provided food, drink, and other necessities for resident deities. The practical provisions for divine comfort suggest that Mesopotamians understood deity presence as involving actual physical manifestation, requiring material support rather than purely spiritual existence. The orientation of ziggurat corners toward cardinal directions rather than aligning sides with these directions represents a deliberate architectural choice with astronomical significance. This corner orientation creates optimal positions for observing sunrise and sunset at equinoxes and solstices, when these events occur at points 45 degrees from cardinal directions. The consistent use of this orientation pattern across multiple ziggurats demonstrates shared astronomical knowledge and coordinated architectural planning among different Mesopotamian cities. The symbolic identification of ziggurats with cosmic mountains extended to their names, which explicitly reference mountain and foundation concepts. The ziggurat at Nippur bore the name Eka, meaning mountain house, while the structure at Babylon was called Itamenanki, meaning house of the foundation platform of heaven and earth. These names encapsulated theological concepts about ziggurats as architectural embodiments of cosmic structure, simultaneously representing earthly mountains, heavenly platforms, and the foundation supporting universal order. The Atrahasis epic provides detailed descriptions of humanity's creation, presenting it not as a single act, but as a systematic process involving multiple attempts and refinements. The text describes how the gods created initial human prototypes that proved unsatisfactory before achieving the desired combination of physical capability and intellectual capacity. These creation accounts include specific details about materials used, procedures followed, and problems encountered during early attempts. The precision of these descriptions, including references to genetic material and gestation periods, suggests the text preserved technical knowledge about biological processes rather than simple creation myths. The Atrahasis epic, preserved in multiple versions dating from the Old Babylonian period through the Neo-Assyrian era, presents human creation as a solution to labor problems faced by the junior gods called Igigi. The text describes how these lesser deities, responsible for agricultural work and irrigation maintenance, rebelled against their assigned tasks due to excessive workload. The great gods, faced with this labor crisis, determined to create substitute workers who could assume the burdensome tasks while freeing divine beings for more appropriate activities. This practical motivation for human creation presents the process as technological problem-solving rather than abstract theological expression. The creation procedure described in the Atrahasis epic involves mixing clay with blood from a slain god, specifically the deity Weila, who is described as possessing intelligence. The goddess Nintu, working under Enki's supervision, combines these materials in specific proportions to create a mixture that will produce living humans. The text provides precise procedural details stating that the divine blood should be mixed with clay in the presence of the assembled gods, with the mixture kneaded thoroughly to ensure complete integration. This emphasis on proper mixing technique and material proportions parallels modern biological concepts about genetic material, requiring proper integration into cellular matrices. The gestation process receives detailed description in the text, specifying that the clay blood mixture was divided into 14 portions, 7 designated for males and 7 for females. Each portion was implanted into the wombs of 14 goddesses who served as birth mothers for the first humans. The text specifies a gestation period of 10 months, or longer than typical human pregnancy, suggesting either different temporal measurement or deliberate extended development for prototype humans. The systematic approach to reproduction, using multiple simultaneous gestations to produce a viable population, demonstrates understanding of biological requirements for establishing sustainable breeding groups. The initial human prototypes produced through this process proved defective according to the text, exhibiting various physical and behavioral problems that required additional refinements. One early version could not retain food, another could not control bodily functions, and a third lacked reproductive capability. These failed prototypes received detailed descriptions that read like clinical case reports, documenting specific deficiencies and their impacts on organism viability. The systematic documentation of failures and subsequent corrections demonstrates an experimental approach to human creation, involving iterative refinement based on observed results. The corrections applied to early human prototypes involved adjustments to the mixture ratios and modifications to the gestation procedures. The text describes how Enki altered the proportion of divine blood to clay, increasing the intelligence component while maintaining physical strength characteristics. Additional modifications involved changes to the incubation environment and post-birth developmental procedures. The technical nature of these adjustments, described with precision unusual for mythological texts, suggests preservation of actual biological knowledge about factors affecting human development. The final successful human design incorporated specific characteristics that balanced divine desires for capable workers with limitations preventing human competition with gods. The text specifies that humans receive sufficient intelligence to understand instructions and perform complex tasks, but not enough wisdom to threaten divine authority. Physical strength was calibrated to enable heavy labor while remaining inferior to divine capabilities. Reproductive capacity was carefully controlled to enable population replacement without excessive growth that would recreate the original problem of overpopulation and noise that had motivated earlier divine interventions. The concept of humans as mixed beings, combining divine essence through the god's blood with earthly matter through clay, receives extensive theological elaboration in Mesopotamian literature. This dual nature explains human capacity for both transcendent thought and base behavior, intellectual achievement, and physical limitation. The mixture paradigm provided Mesopotamians with a framework for understanding human potential and constraints, explaining capabilities that exceeded those of animals while acknowledging limitations that prevented equality with gods. The preservation of creation knowledge through ritual reenactments ensured transmission of these narratives across generations. The Babylonian New Year festival included ceremonial recitations of the Atrahasis epic, with priests performing ritual gestures representing the mixing of clay and blood. These dramatic presentations transformed abstract theological concepts into embodied experiences that reinforced cultural memory of human origins. The ritual preservation of creation narratives demonstrates their importance for Mesopotamian cultural identity and religious understanding. Sumerian cosmological texts describe how primordial deities divided cosmic responsibilities among themselves according to specific protocols and hierarchies. Anu received sovereignty over the heavens, Enlil governed the atmosphere and earth, while Enki controlled the waters beneath. This division represented more than territorial allocation, establishing operational jurisdictions that determined which deities would oversee specific natural phenomena and technological domains. His administrative tablets from temple archives reveal elaborate protocols for invoking different deities based on their assigned cosmic responsibilities, suggesting these jurisdictional divisions were understood as functional realities rather than mythological constructs. The cosmic division appears systematically documented in the text known as the Babylonian Theodicy, a wisdom composition preserved on tablets from the Khazit period. This text describes how Anu, Enlil, and Enki drew lots to determine their respective domains, with Anu receiving the heavens, Enlil the earth and atmosphere, and Enki the subterranean waters. The use of lot drawing as allocation mechanism presents the cosmic division as impartial procedure following established protocols rather than arbitrary assertion of power, where this procedural emphasis reflects Mesopotamian cultural values regarding proper governance through institutional mechanisms rather than personal authority. The heavenly domain assigned to Anu encompassed not only physical sky, but also abstract concepts of supreme authority and cosmic law. Anu's position as sky god granted him sovereignty over the highest heaven, where the great gods assembled in council to make cosmic decisions. Temple texts describe Anu's palace as the location where destinies were determined and fundamental laws were established. This association between heavenly realm and supreme legislative authority created cosmological foundations for earthly governance structures, where kings derived legitimacy from celestial mandate. Enlil's governance of atmosphere and Earth's surface granted him authority over weather phenomena, agricultural productivity, and human political structures. Hymns to Enlil describe his control over winds, storms, and rainfall that determined agricultural success or failure. The god's jurisdiction extended to appointing earthly kings and establishing governmental institutions that maintained social order. This combination of meteorological and political authority made Enlil the most immediately powerful deity in practical terms, despite Anu's theoretical supremacy. The integration of natural and political governance under single divine authority reflects Mesopotamian understanding of interconnections between environmental conditions and social stability. Enki's control of subterranean waters granted him authority over groundwater, rivers, and irrigation systems essential for Mesopotamian agriculture. The god's domain included not only physical water, but also the wisdom and knowledge metaphorically associated with life-giving fluids. Temple texts describe Enki as Lord of the Abzu, master of all crafts and patron of technology and innovation. This association between water control and intellectual activity reflects practical realities of Mesopotamian civilization, where hydraulic management required sophisticated engineering knowledge and mathematical calculation capabilities. The division of cosmic responsibilities extended beyond the primary triad to include secondary deities who governed specific natural phenomena and technological domains. Shamash received authority over solar phenomena and justice, creating connections between celestial regularity and legal order. Sin governed lunar cycles and calendar calculation, establishing foundations for timekeeping systems. Ishtar controlled aspects of warfare and sexuality, domains linked through concepts of productive and destructive power. This systematic allocation of responsibilities created comprehensive divine administration that encompassed all aspects of natural and social existence. Administrative texts from temple archives document practical applications of divine jurisdictional divisions through protocols for directing prayers and offerings to appropriate deities. These ritual texts specify which gods should be invoked for particular requests, creating bureaucratic procedures for accessing divine assistance. Prayers for rain were directed to Enlil, requests for successful irrigation to Enki, and petitions regarding legal disputes to Shamash. This systematic approach to divine communication reflects understanding of cosmic governance as operating through specialized administrative channels rather than generalized divine power. The territorial aspects of divine jurisdiction extended to specific geographical regions assigned to different deities. Anu's earthly cult center at Uruk represented his terrestrial administration point, while Enlil's temple at Nippur served as earthly equivalent to his atmospheric authority. Enki's primary cult site at Eridu, located near the Persian Gulf, provided appropriate coastal location for the god associated with fresh water and maritime wisdom. This geographical distribution of divine cult centers created spatial representation of cosmic administrative structure. with different cities serving as earthly headquarters for different aspects of divine governance. The mathematical precision underlying cosmic divisions appears in texts that assign specific numerical values to different deities based on their hierarchical positions and functional domains. Anu received the number 60, representing his supreme position as head of the pantheon. Enlil's number 50 indicated his secondary but practically dominant role. Enki's number 40 reflected his position as third in the primary divine triad. These divine numbers functioned as computational codes used in astronomical calculations, ritual procedures, and administrative accounting systems, demonstrating integration of theological concepts into practical mathematical operations. Sumerian mathematical texts reveal that specific numbers were considered sacred due to their association with primordial cosmic organization. The number 60, foundation of the Sumerian numerical system, appears consistently in astronomical calculations, architectural proportions, and chronological measurements. The number 7 receives particular emphasis in connection with primordial cosmic structure, including 7 heavens, 7 earths, and 7 primordial sages. Analysis of these sacred number systems reveals sophisticated mathematical relationships that incorporate astronomical cycles, geometric principles, and natural harmonics, suggesting they were derived from systematic study of cosmic patterns rather than arbitrary religious symbolism. The base 60 numerical system employed throughout Mesopotamian mathematics and astronomy represents one of humanity's most significant intellectual achievements, creating computational frameworks still used in modern timekeeping and angular measurement. The system's sexagesimal structure divides the circle into 360 degrees, each degree into 60 minutes, and each minute into 60 seconds, creating hierarchical divisions that enable precise astronomical calculations. The choice of 60 as base number reflects its exceptional divisibility, possessing 12 factors including 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 10, 12, 15, 20, and 30. This divisibility makes 60 ideal for fractional calculations involving common divisions, enabling computational efficiency unmatched by decimal systems. Mathematical tablets from the Old Babylonian period demonstrate sophisticated applications of sexagesimal notation in astronomical calculations that required manipulation of large numbers and complex fractions. Tablet Plimpton 322, housed at Columbia University, contains trigonometric calculations using Pythagorean triples that demonstrate understanding of mathematical relationships centuries before Greek mathematicians supposedly discovered these principles. The tablet's calculations employ sexagesimal fractions with precision extending to multiple decimal places, indicating that Mesopotamian mathematicians possessed computational techniques comparable to modern numerical analysis. The sacred significance of 60 extends beyond practical computational advantages to encompass cosmological symbolism, connecting earthly mathematics with celestial mechanics. The number 60 corresponds to Anu's divine number, establishing the supreme sky god as patron of the numerical system itself. This association between highest deity and fundamental mathematical base creates theological foundations for numerical practice, presenting mathematics as divine gift rather than human invention. Temple texts describe how Anu established the base 60 system during primordial cosmic organization, creating mathematical frameworks that would govern all subsequent calculations. The number 7 receives extensive elaboration in Sumerian cosmological texts as fundamental organizing principle, structuring multiple aspects of cosmic order. The 7 heavens, 7 earths, and 7 primordial sages create recurring patterns that suggest 7 held special significance in Mesopotamian mathematical and religious thought. The prevalence of 7 in cosmic structures extends to ritual practices including 7-day ceremonial cycles, 7 gates in the underworld, and 7 stringed musical instruments used in temple ceremonies. This systematic application of 7 across diverse domains indicates it functioned as organizing principle rather than coincidental repetition. The mathematical relationship between 7 and astronomical cycles provides rational foundations for the number's sacred status. The lunar month of approximately 29.5 days divides naturally into 4 weeks of 7 days, creating a 7-day cycle that synchronizes with visible lunar phases. The 7 visible celestial bodies known to ancient astronomers, including Sun, Moon, Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn provided additional significance for the number 7 as representing completeness in celestial observation. The correlation between 7-day weeks and both lunar phases and planetary count demonstrates that sacred numbers derived from systematic astronomical observation rather than arbitrary mystical speculation. The number 12 appears throughout Mesopotamian mathematics and cosmology as another fundamental organizing principle, dividing the year into 12 months, the day into 12 double hours, and the zodiac into 12 constellations. The relationship between 12 and 60 creates nested cycles where 5 12-unit periods equal one 60-unit cycle, establishing mathematical harmonies that facilitated complex calculations. The 12-fold division of the zodiac enabled precise tracking of solar position throughout the annual cycle, creating foundations for astrological systems that would influence Mediterranean and Near Eastern cultures for millennia. The number 3600, calculated as 60 squared, receives special designation in Sumerian mathematics as the Sar, a unit employed in measuring cosmic time periods and spatial distances. The Sumerian king list employs Sar units for measuring antediluvian rain lengths, creating chronologies extending across hundreds of thousands of years when expressed in conventional temporal units. This use of Sar for measuring primordial time suggests Sumerians recognized multiple temporal scales, with cosmic time operating according to different parameters than human historical time. The mathematical precision of Sar-based chronologies indicates sophisticated understanding of nested temporal cycles operating at different scales. The integration of sacred numbers into architectural proportions created buildings that physically embodied mathematical principles considered fundamental to cosmic order. Temple ground plans consistently employ proportional relationships based on sacred numbers, with dimensions frequently expressing ratios derived from 7, 12, and 60. The Akur temple at Nippur incorporated measurements encoding these sacred numbers in both horizontal and vertical dimensions, creating three-dimensional mathematical relationships that transformed the building into physical representation of cosmic numerical order. This architectural encoding of sacred mathematics demonstrates that Mesopotamian builders understood their constructions as materializing abstract mathematical principles. The musical applications of sacred numbers appear in texts describing the mathematics of harmonic intervals and the construction of musical instruments. The 7-stringed lyre, standard instrument in Mesopotamian temple music, created intervals based on mathematical ratios that generated consonant harmonies. Temple musicians employed numerical relationships between string lengths to produce specific pitches, applying mathematical knowledge to create acoustic effects considered appropriate for divine worship. The integration of mathematical principles into musical practice demonstrates Mesopotamian recognition of connections between numerical relationships and aesthetic experience. Sumerian texts contain references to a primordial language spoken before the confusion of tongues, described as the language in which the gods established cosmic order through the power of naming and decree. The Sumerian language itself was considered sacred due to its association with this primordial speech. Linguistic analysis reveals that Sumerian demonstrates unusual characteristics for a natural language, including a agglutinative structure and precise technical vocabulary for advanced concepts in mathematics, astronomy, and engineering. These linguistic features suggest Sumerian may have been deliberately constructed or refined for technical communication, rather than evolving naturally through gradual cultural development. The concept of primordial divine language appears in the myth of Enki and the world order, where the god organizes cosmic domains through the power of authoritative speech. The text describes how Enki traveled throughout the known world, pronouncing decrees that establish proper functions for each region, river, and natural feature. These verbal pronouncements created reality through naming, with spoken words possessing creative power that brought order from chaos. This linguistic cosmology presents language not as arbitrary convention for labeling pre-existing reality, but as constitutive force that generates reality through proper naming and description. The Sumerian language's agglutinative structure, building complex words through systematic combination of discrete morphemes, creates exceptional precision in expressing technical and abstract concepts. A single Sumerian word can incorporate multiple grammatical and semantic elements, including subject, object, verb, tense, and modifiers, producing compact expressions that convey information requiring multiple words in inflected languages. This structural efficiency makes Sumerian particularly suitable for technical documentation where precision and brevity are essential. The language's capacity for creating new compound words through systematic morpheme combination enables expression of novel concepts without requiring vocabulary expansion through borrowing or innovation. The technical vocabulary preserved in Sumerian mathematical and astronomical texts demonstrates sophistication unexpected in a supposedly ancient primitive language. Terms for advanced mathematical concepts including zero, place value notation, sexagesimal fractions, and geometric transformations appear in earliest mathematical texts without evidence of gradual terminological development. The astronomical vocabulary includes precise terms for stellar positions, planetary movements, eclipse phenomena, and calendar calculations that indicate comprehensive technical understanding. This advanced technical terminology appearing fully formed in earliest texts suggests either remarkably rapid linguistic development or inheritance of terminology from earlier sources. The relationship between Sumerian and other ancient Near Eastern languages presents puzzles that complicate conventional theories of linguistic evolution. Sumerian demonstrates no clear genetic relationship with Semitic, Indo-European, or other known language families, appearing as linguistic isolate without identified relatives. This isolation raises questions about Sumerian origins and its relationship to other languages spoken in early Mesopotamia. The language's grammatical structure and phonological system differ fundamentally from surrounding Semitic languages, suggesting either extreme antiquity that preceded linguistic diversification or introduction from external sources. The preservation of Sumerian as scholarly and liturgical language long after it ceased to be spoken natively demonstrates its sacred status in Mesopotamian civilization. Akkadian-speaking Babylonians and Assyrians continued using Sumerian for religious texts, scholarly compositions, and official inscriptions throughout the 2nd and 1st millennia BC, treating it as classical language comparable to Latin in medieval Europe. This conscious preservation of dead language for sacred and scholarly purposes indicates that Sumerian was valued not merely as cultural heritage, but as a uniquely appropriate medium for expressing religious and technical knowledge. The bilingual lexical texts produced by Mesopotamian scribal schools document systematic efforts to preserve Sumerian linguistic knowledge through translation into Akkadian. These lexical lists, containing thousands of entries organized by semantic categories, provided dictionaries enabling Akkadian speakers to read and compose Sumerian texts. The comprehensiveness of these lexical compilations and the care devoted to their production demonstrate institutional commitment to preserving Sumerian language knowledge. The existence of these educational materials indicates that Sumerian literacy was considered essential for educated elites long after the language's extinction as a native tongue. The magical power attributed to Sumerian words in later Mesopotamian ritual texts reflects beliefs about the language's special connection to primordial creative forces. Incantations and magical formulas preserved in Akkadian texts frequently include Sumerian words or phrases considered particularly efficacious due to their association with divine speech. These ritual uses of Sumerian vocabulary treated the ancient language as possessing inherent power beyond its semantic content, with proper pronunciation of Sumerian formulas considered essential for magical effectiveness. This ritualization of Sumerian linguistic elements demonstrates cultural beliefs about the language's sacred nature and its continuing connection to divine creative powers. The standardization of Sumerian orthography and grammar through scribal school training created linguistic consistency across vast geographical areas and extended time periods. Student tablets from scribal schools across Mesopotamia demonstrate identical exercises, grammatical paradigms, and lexical lists, indicating centralized curriculum development and standardized pedagogical methods. This educational standardization ensured that Sumerian literacy remained consistent despite the language no longer having native speakers to maintain natural linguistic evolution. The successful preservation of linguistic standards through institutional education demonstrates sophisticated understanding of language maintenance requirements. Sumerian astronomical texts describe the organization of stars into constellations as occurring during the primordial period when cosmic order was established. The Mulapin Compendium preserves detailed star catalogues that divide the sky into 3 paths associated with Anu, Enlil, and Enki, creating a systematic framework for astronomical observation. The precision of stellar positions recorded in these texts and the sophistication of mathematical calculations used for predicting celestial events indicate access to advanced astronomical knowledge from the earliest periods. The consistency of Sumerian constellation systems with astronomical traditions found in Egypt, India, and other ancient civilizations suggests derivation from common primordial sources. The Mulapin text, whose name derives from its opening words Mul-Apin, meaning plough star constellation, represents the most comprehensive astronomical compendium surviving from ancient Mesopotamia. The composition, preserved on tablets dating to the Neo-Assyrian period, but clearly based on much earlier observations, contains detailed star catalogues organized according to the three-path celestial division. The text lists 33 constellations in the path of Enlil, 23 in the path of Anu, and 15 in the path of Enki, creating comprehensive coverage of the visible sky. Each constellation receives description, including its position, associated deities, and significance for calendar calculation and omen interpretation. The three-path division of the celestial sphere corresponds to declination zones, rather than arbitrary theological categorization. The path of Enlil encompasses stars north of approximately 15 degrees declination, corresponding to the northern celestial hemisphere visible from Mesopotamian latitudes. The path of Anu covers the central celestial band between plus and minus 15 degrees declination, approximately corresponding to the ecliptic zone where Sun, Moon, and planets appear. The path of Enki includes southern stars below minus 15 degrees declination, representing the southern celestial hemisphere. This declination-based organization demonstrates that constellation classification followed systematic astronomical principles rather than religious symbolism. The stellar position data preserved in mul.apin demonstrates observational precision remarkable for naked eye astronomy. The text records rising times for different constellations throughout the year, providing information enabling calendar synchronization and seasonal predictions. The accuracy of these rising time calculations indicates systematic observation programs conducted over extended periods to establish average values, accounting for annual variations. The mathematical techniques employed for converting between observed rising times and calendar dates demonstrate sophisticated understanding of the relationship between sidereal and solar time. The zodiacal constellation system that would dominate later Mesopotamian and Mediterranean astronomy emerges in developed form in Mul-Apin and related texts. The 12 zodiacal constellations, corresponding to 12 months of the solar year, create systematic framework for tracking solar position and calculating planetary movements. The mathematical division of the ecliptic into 12 equal 30-degree segments enabled precise angular measurements and facilitated astronomical calculations. This standardized zodiacal system appears fully formed in earliest astronomical texts, without evidence of gradual development, suggesting inheritance from earlier sources or rapid systematic organization of pre-existing observational data. The consistency between Mesopotamian constellation traditions and those found in Egyptian, Indian, and Greek astronomical systems raises questions about possible common origins or knowledge transmission. Several constellations appear with similar forms and names across these different cultures, despite geographical separation and apparent lack of direct contact during formative periods. The constellation recognized as Taurus the Bull appears in Mesopotamian, Egyptian, and Indian sources with nearly identical stellar associations. The 7 stars forming the Pleiades receive recognition and naming in cultures worldwide, suggesting either universal human pattern recognition or transmission from common sources. The use of constellations for calendar regulation demonstrates their practical importance beyond religious or mythological significance. The heliacal rising of specific stars, when they first become visible just before sunrise after periods of invisibility, has provided reliable calendar markers that enabled agricultural planning and ritual scheduling. mul.apin contains extensive tables correlating stellar rising times with calendar dates, creating functional calendars based on astronomical observation. The precision of these calendrical calculations and their successful application over centuries demonstrates that constellation systems served essential practical functions in organizing temporal cycles. The association of specific deities with particular constellations created theological frameworks for understanding celestial phenomena as divine activities. The constellation Orion was identified with the god Ninurta, the Pleiades with the 7 divine judges of the underworld, and various other stellar groups with different deities. These divine associations transformed abstract stellar patterns into narrative frameworks connecting celestial and terrestrial events. The systematic nature of these deity-constellation correspondences suggests deliberate organization rather than random attribution. The mathematical techniques employed for calculating planetary positions relative to zodiacal constellations demonstrate advanced understanding of celestial mechanics. Babylonian astronomical texts from the Seleucid period preserve mathematical procedures for predicting planetary locations using sophisticated computational algorithms. These procedures employ iterative calculations, numerical interpolation, and other advanced mathematical techniques that enable accurate long-term predictions. The sophistication of these computational methods indicates development over extended periods of systematic astronomical observation and mathematical analysis. Sumerian ritual texts describe elaborate sacrificial protocols that were established during the primordial period as proper methods for communication between human and divine realms. These protocols specified exact materials, timing, and procedures required for different types of offerings, with precision suggesting technical requirements rather than arbitrary religious preferences. Temple administrative records document meticulous adherence to these ancient protocols across millennia, indicating they were understood as essential procedures rather than optional traditions. Chemical analysis of residues from ancient temple vessels reveals that ritual recipes incorporated specific compounds and proportions that match textual descriptions, confirming the technical precision of preserved sacrificial knowledge. The concept of sacrifice as communication technology between human and divine realms pervades Mesopotamian religious thought, presenting offerings not as gifts to placate deities, but as technical procedures for establishing and maintaining proper relationships. Temple texts describe sacrificial procedures using terminology derived from administrative and technological domains rather than purely religious vocabulary. The language employed for describing sacrifice parallels that used for describing irrigation technology, building construction, and other technical procedures, suggesting that Mesopotamians understood ritual as applied technology rather than symbolic religious practice. The materials specified for different sacrifice types demonstrate systematic understanding of chemical and physical properties relevant to ritual effectiveness. Incense offerings required specific aromatic resins, including frankincense, myrrh, and cedar, materials selected for their combustion characteristics and aromatic properties. Libation offerings specified particular liquids including beer, wine, milk, and honey, each appropriate for different ritual contexts and divine recipients. Animal sacrifices designated specific species, ages, and physical characteristics for different ceremonies, creating comprehensive systems of sacrificial taxonomy. The precision of these material specifications indicates technical understanding of how different substances behaved in ritual contexts. Temple administrative archives preserve detailed records documenting sacrificial materials, consumption that confirm textual descriptions of ritual requirements. Economic texts from the Ur-III period, approximately 2100 BC, record daily expenditures for temple sacrifices, including precise quantities of grain, beer, animals, and other offerings. These administrative records match the specifications found in ritual texts, demonstrating that prescribed sacrificial protocols were actually implemented rather than representing idealized procedures ignored in practice. The consistency between ritual prescriptions and administrative records confirms that sacrificial systems operated according to documented standards maintained across extended periods. Chemical analysis of residues from ancient temple vessels provides material evidence confirming the accuracy of textual descriptions of sacrificial recipes. Analysis conducted on pottery fragments from temples at Ur and Uruk revealed organic residues including animal fats, grain alcohols, and aromatic resins matching substances specified in ritual texts. The chemical signatures of these residues indicate specific preparation methods, including controlled heating, fermentation, and combination in particular sequences. The correlation between chemical evidence and textual descriptions validates the technical accuracy of preserved ritual knowledge. The timing protocols for sacrificial rituals demonstrate integration with astronomical cycles and calendar systems. Ritual texts specify optimal times for different offerings based on lunar phases, stellar positions, and seasonal markers. Daily sacrifices occurred at specific times coordinated with solar movements, while monthly ceremonies aligned with new moon observations. Annual festivals required sacrifices timed to solstices, equinoxes, and heliacal stellar risings. This astronomical timing created sacrificial calendars that synchronized religious activities with celestial cycles, ensuring that ritual communications occurred when cosmic conditions were optimal. The procedural sequences prescribed for complex sacrificial rituals demonstrate understanding of process management and quality control. Ritual texts describe multi-stage procedures requiring specific actions performed in prescribed order, with quality checkpoints ensuring proper execution. Purification procedures preceded sacrificial activities, followed by material preparation, offering presentation, and disposal of remains according to specified protocols. The systematic nature of these procedural sequences parallels modern manufacturing processes, with their emphasis on standardized procedures and quality verification. The architectural integration of sacrificial facilities into temple design created permanent infrastructure supporting ritual activities. Temple complexes incorporated specialized areas for animal slaughter, cooking facilities for preparing food offerings, and storage areas for ritual materials. Archaeological excavation of these facilities reveals sophisticated infrastructure including drainage systems for blood disposal, ovens designed for specific cooking requirements, and storage magazines with environmental controls preserving perishable materials. The substantial investment in specialized ritual infrastructure demonstrates the central importance of sacrificial systems in temple operations. The preservation of sacrificial knowledge through priestly training programs ensured continuity of ritual practices across generations. Curriculum texts from scribal schools include instruction in sacrificial procedures, material preparation, and ritual timing. Students memorized extensive catalogues of offerings appropriate for different occasions, learning the technical knowledge necessary for proper ritual performance. The formalization of sacrificial education created institutional mechanisms, ensuring accurate transmission of complex procedural knowledge independent of individual practitioner expertise. Mesopotamian texts preserve accounts of a primordial rebellion when lesser deities revolted against assigned labor obligations, leading to the creation of humanity to assume these burdensome tasks. The Atrahasis epic describes this rebellion in detail, including specific grievances about working conditions and the negotiation process that resulted in humanity's creation as a solution. The text presents these events not as mythological allegory, but as historical account of labor disputes and their resolution through technological innovation. The creation of humanity appears as a deliberate engineering project designed to solve specific operational problems faced by the divine administration. The Atrahasis epic opens with a description of the cosmic labor system established after the primordial division of responsibilities among the great gods. The text specifies that the Igigi, lesser deities numbering 600, were assigned responsibility for agricultural labor, irrigation maintenance, and canal construction necessary for organizing the newly separated earth. These lesser gods worked under supervision of the great gods Anu, Enlil, and Enki, creating hierarchical labor organization paralleling human administrative structures. The systematic description of divine labor assignments presents cosmic organization as bureaucratic administration rather than mystical religious framework. The working conditions that provoked the Igigi rebellion receive detailed documentation in the text, including specific complaints about workload intensity, inadequate rest periods, and harsh supervision. The Igigi labored for 3,600 years, digging irrigation channels and maintaining waterways without relief. The text describes how the lesser gods bore the drudgery, carried heavy baskets, and suffered under the labor's oppressiveness. These detailed descriptions of working conditions and grievances parallel labor dispute documentation in human administrative texts, suggesting the narrative preserved actual institutional memory of labor organization challenges. The rebellion itself receives dramatic treatment describing how the Igigi ceased work, burned their tools, and marched to Enlil's temple demanding relief from oppressive labor conditions. The text specifies that the rebellion occurred at night, with the lesser gods surrounding Enlil's temple and calling for negotiation with divine leadership. This nocturnal timing and the organized collective action demonstrate strategic planning and coordination among the rebellious workers. The narrative presents the rebellion as legitimate labor protest against unjust conditions rather than criminal mutiny against proper authority. The negotiation process following the rebellion demonstrates sophisticated conflict resolution procedures involving mediation and creative problem-solving. Enlil initially responded with anger, threatening severe punishment for the rebellious workers. However, Enki intervened, proposing creation of substitute labourers who could assume the Agigi's burdensome tasks while allowing the divine workers to return to more appropriate activities. The text describes extensive discussions among the great gods, weighing different solutions and their potential consequences. This deliberative process presents divine governance as operating through rational discussion and consensus building rather than arbitrary divine decree. The decision to create humanity as solution to the labour crisis receives explicit presentation as technological innovation designed to solve specific operational problems. Enki's proposal specified that substitute workers should possess sufficient intelligence to understand instructions and perform complex tasks, but should lack capabilities that might enable them to challenge divine authority. The design specifications for humanity balance multiple competing requirements, including physical strength for heavy labour, intellectual capacity for following complex instructions, and reproductive capability for maintaining workforce without requiring continuous divine intervention. The implementation of the creation project involved systematic experimental procedures, testing different approaches and refining results based on observed performance. The text describes how initial prototypes failed to meet design requirements, exhibiting various deficiencies that required correction through modified procedures. This iterative development process demonstrates understanding of technological development as requiring experimentation and refinement rather than achieving perfection through initial design. The documentation of failures and subsequent corrections preserves genuine knowledge about systematic problem-solving through experimental methodology. The resolution of the primordial rebellion through technological innovation established fundamental patterns that would characterize human civilization. The creation of humanity as technological solution to labor problems established precedents for addressing challenges through innovation rather than conflict. The narrative framework presenting this creation as response to specific operational requirements provided Mesopotamians with understanding of human purpose as serving productive functions within cosmic order. This utilitarian view of human origins contrasted with creation narratives emphasizing divine generosity or moral purposes, presenting humanity as pragmatic solution to practical problems. The preservation of rebellion narratives through ritual recitation ensured transmission of these accounts across generations while reinforcing social hierarchies. Annual New Year festivals included ceremonial recitations of the Atrahasis epic, reminding participants of humanity's origins and ongoing obligations to divine authorities. These ritual performances transformed abstract narratives into embodied experiences that reinforced cultural values regarding labour, authority, and social order. The institutional preservation of rebellion narratives through regular ritual performance demonstrates their importance for maintaining social stability and legitimizing hierarchical structures. Sumerian texts describe kingship as descending from heaven during the primordial period, established as the proper system for organizing human society according to divine principles. The Sumerian king list begins with the statement that after the kingship descended from heaven, the kingship was in Eridu, presenting royal authority as a divine institution rather than human innovation. Archaeological evidence from early Sumerian cities reveals governmental structures and administrative systems that appear fully developed, rather than showing gradual evolution from simpler forms. The sophistication of these administrative systems, including detailed record-keeping and hierarchical organization, supports textual accounts describing kingship as an established institution rather than emerging political development. The concept of kingship as celestial gift rather than human political innovation pervades Sumerian political theology, establishing divine sanction as essential foundation for legitimate royal authority. The formulaic opening of the Sumerian king list, preserved on multiple tablets including the Weld-Blundell prism dating to approximately 1900 BC, explicitly states that kingship descended from heaven as complete institutional package rather than emerging through gradual political development. This theological framework presented royal governance as implementing divine administrative principles on earth rather than representing human political innovation or social contract. The administrative sophistication documented in earlier Sumerian governmental records demonstrates capabilities that exceed expectations for supposedly nascent political institutions. Economic texts from the Jemdet Nasser period, approximately 3100 BC, reveal complex accounting systems tracking agricultural production, labour allocation, and resource distribution across extensive territories. These administrative tablets employ standardized notation systems, hierarchical organizational structures, and sophisticated mathematical calculations that indicate mature bureaucratic institutions. The absence of simpler precursor systems in the archaeological record supports textual claims that governmental institutions were established according to predetermined organizational principles. The royal insignia described in Sumerian texts as essential components of legitimate kingship received detailed specification indicating their function as material embodiments of divine authority. The crown, scepter, and throne appear consistently in royal imagery and coronation rituals as physical objects conveying legitimate authority rather than mere symbolic ornaments. Temple texts describe these royal insignia as among the ME, fundamental cosmic principles established during primordial organization. The materialization of authority in specific objects created transferable sovereignty that could pass between rulers through controlled ceremonial procedures, rather than requiring divine intervention for each succession. The coronation rituals documented in temple archives preserve detailed procedures for transferring kingship from divine to human hands through ceremonial installation. These rituals, conducted at major temple complexes including Nippur and Uruk, involved elaborate purification ceremonies, ritual investiture with royal insignia, and formal recognition by assembled deities represented through their cult statues. The complexity of coronation procedures and their consistent preservation across centuries demonstrates institutional commitment to maintaining proper protocols for legitimizing royal authority. The ritualization of power transfer created predictable succession mechanisms that stabilize political transitions. The relationship between divine kingship and earthly governance created dual sovereignty, where human kings ruled as representatives implementing divine policies rather than as autonomous political authorities. Royal inscriptions consistently present kings as appointed by specific deities to fulfill predetermined roles within cosmic order. This theological framework limited royal authority by subjecting it to divine oversight, while simultaneously legitimizing royal power through celestial sanction. The balance between divine authorization and divine limitation created governmental systems where kings possessed substantial practical authority while remaining theoretically subordinate to cosmic law. The administrative infrastructure supporting royal governance demonstrates sophistication in information management and bureaucratic organization that rivals modern governmental systems. Temple archives from Girsu dating to the 3rd dynasty of Ur, approximately 2100 BC, contain tens of thousands of administrative tablets documenting every aspect of state operations. These records track agricultural production from individual fields, monitor labor assignments for thousands of workers, record tribute collection from subject territories, and document diplomatic correspondence with foreign powers. The comprehensiveness and precision of this administrative documentation indicates highly developed bureaucratic capabilities. The legal codes promulgated by Mesopotamian kings demonstrate systematic codification of judicial principles and procedural standards that transformed customary law into documented legal systems. The Code of Ur-Nammu, dating to approximately 2100 BC and representing the earliest known law code, prescribes specific penalties for defined offences, establishes procedural requirements for legal proceedings, and creates institutional mechanisms for dispute resolution. The systematic organization of legal principles in written codes transformed justice administration from arbitrary judicial discretion into rule-based systems operating according to documented standards. This legal codification demonstrates governmental sophistication in creating institutional frameworks that transcended individual rulers. The territorial organization of Sumerian city-states reveals systematic approaches to geographical administration that created hierarchical governance structures. Major urban centers functioned as administrative capitals, governing surrounding agricultural territories and subordinate settlements. Temple records document the division of territories into administrative districts, each supervised by appointed officials responsible for tax collection, labor mobilization, and maintenance of order. This hierarchical territorial organization created governance systems capable of administering large populations and extensive territories through delegated authority and standardized procedures. The integration of religious and political authority in the person of the king created governance systems where temporal and spiritual power merged into unified administration. Kings served simultaneously as political rulers and chief priests, combining governmental authority with ritual responsibilities. This fusion of religious and political roles prevented the emergence of competing power centres that might challenge royal authority, while ensuring that governmental activities maintained alignment with religious principles. The institutional integration of temple and palace created comprehensive governance systems that addressed both material and spiritual dimensions of social order. Sumerian agricultural texts describe the establishment of farming techniques during the primordial period under direct divine instruction. The text known as the Farmer's Instructions preserves detailed agricultural knowledge covering ploughing techniques, irrigation management, and crop rotation systems attributed to divine teaching. Archaeological evidence from early Sumerian agricultural sites reveals irrigation networks and field management systems that demonstrate sophisticated understanding of hydrology, soil science, and agricultural engineering. The sudden appearance of these advanced agricultural capabilities supports textual accounts describing farming knowledge as revealed technology rather than gradual human innovation. The Farmer's Instructions, preserved on tablets from the Old Babylonian period, but clearly based on earlier Sumerian sources, provides comprehensive agricultural manual covering the complete farming cycle, from field preparation through harvest and storage. The text begins with detailed instructions for preparing fields during summer months, specifying that farmers should flood fields multiple times to leach accumulated salts from soil and eliminate weed seeds. These preparation procedures demonstrate understanding of soil chemistry and the effects of salinization on crop productivity. The technical sophistication of these agricultural recommendations indicates access to systematic knowledge about soil management developed through extended observation and experimentation. The irrigation instructions preserved in agricultural texts demonstrate comprehensive understanding of water management principles and hydraulic engineering. The texts specify optimal water depths for different crops, describe timing protocols for irrigation scheduling, and provide methods for calculating water requirements based on field size and soil type. These hydraulic calculations require mathematical capabilities including area measurement, volume estimation, and flow rate determination that indicate sophisticated engineering knowledge. The precision of irrigation instructions suggests they derive from systematic study of water behavior and crop water requirements rather than casual observation. The ploughing techniques described in agricultural texts reveal detailed knowledge of soil mechanics and the effects of different tillage methods on crop performance. The Farmer's Instructions specifies that fields should be ploughed 8 times, using different plough configurations for each pass, creating soil structure optimal for seed germination and root development. The text describes how plough depth should vary according to soil type and crop requirements, with deeper ploughing for heavy soils and shallower cultivation for sandy soils. This differentiated approach to tillage demonstrates understanding that agricultural practices must adapt to local soil conditions rather than following universal procedures. The seed selection and planting instructions preserved in agricultural texts indicate understanding of genetic principles and plant breeding techniques. The texts specify that farmers should reserve the best grain from each harvest for use as seed in subsequent planting, maintaining and improving crop quality through selective breeding. Instructions for seed treatment before planting include soaking in specific solutions and coating with protective substances that prevented fungal diseases and insect damage. These seed preparation techniques demonstrate sophisticated understanding of plant pathology and pest management principles. The crop rotation systems described in Sumerian agricultural texts reveal understanding of soil fertility dynamics and the benefits of alternating different crops. The texts recommend rotating grain crops with legumes and leaving fields fallow periodically to restore soil productivity. This rotation practice prevented soil exhaustion while maintaining consistent agricultural output across multiple growing seasons. The systematic application of rotation principles demonstrates recognition that sustainable agriculture requires active soil management rather than passive extraction of natural fertility. Archaeological evidence from early Mesopotamian agricultural sites confirms the sophistication of irrigation systems described in textual sources. Excavations in the Diyala River Valley conducted during the 1930s by the Oriental Institute revealed extensive canal networks dating to the early dynastic period, approximately 2900 BC. These irrigation systems incorporated sophisticated engineering features including flow control gates, settling basins for sediment removal, and distribution networks that delivered water to multiple field systems. The scale and complexity of these hydraulic installations demonstrate engineering capabilities that required comprehensive understanding of water management principles. The agricultural productivity achieved through Sumerian farming techniques enabled population densities and urban development unprecedented in human history. Economic text from the Ur-3 period document grain yields averaging approximately 2,000 litres per hectare, productivity levels that exceeded European agricultural output until the 19th century. These exceptional yields resulted from integrated application of multiple advanced techniques, including irrigation, fertilization, crop rotation, and selective breeding. The agricultural surplus generated through these intensive farming methods provided economic foundations supporting urban civilization, specialized craft production, and complex social hierarchies. The institutional preservation of agricultural knowledge through temple-based educational systems ensured transmission of farming techniques across generations. Agricultural texts were copied in scribal schools as part of standard curriculum, training future administrators in the technical knowledge necessary for managing agricultural production. This institutional preservation of farming knowledge created stability in agricultural practices that maintained productivity across political disruptions and dynastic changes. The formalization of agricultural education demonstrates recognition that farming knowledge represented essential cultural capital requiring systematic preservation and transmission. Sumerian metallurgical texts describe the discovery and use of metals as occurring during the primordial period under divine guidance. The text known as the Debate Between Copper and Silver preserves traditions about the establishment of metallurgy and its importance for civilization. Archaeological analysis of early Mesopotamian metal artifacts reveals sophisticated alloying techniques and manufacturing processes that demonstrate advanced metallurgical knowledge. The precision of alloy ratios and the complexity of smelting procedures found in earliest metal objects suggest access to comprehensive technical knowledge rather than gradual experimental development of metallurgical capabilities. The Debate Between Copper and Silver, a literary composition preserved on tablets from the Old Babylonian period, presents metallurgical knowledge through the device of competitive boasting between personified metals. Each metal enumerates its contribution to civilization and argues for its superior value and utility. Copper emphasizes its role in producing tools, weapons, and vessels essential for daily life, while silver stresses its function as medium of exchange and store of value. The technical accuracy of metallurgical information embedded in this literary framework demonstrates that poetic compositions could serve as vehicles for preserving and transmitting practical technical knowledge. The copper smelting procedures described in technical texts demonstrate sophisticated understanding of chemical processes required for extracting metal from ore. These procedures specify that copper ores should be crushed to uniform particle size, so as to mixed with specific proportions of charcoal, and heated in furnaces designed to achieve and maintain temperatures exceeding 1,100 degrees Celsius. The texts describe how smelting requires controlled air supply to create reducing atmosphere that facilitates metal extraction while preventing excessive oxidation. This detailed specification of smelting parameters indicates comprehensive understanding of the chemical reactions involved in copper production. The bronze alloying techniques documented in metallurgical texts reveal precise knowledge of the optimal copper-tin ratios for different applications. The texts specify that tools and weapons should contain approximately 10% tin, creating alloys with optimal hardness and edge retention characteristics. Casting applications requiring fluidity for detailed reproduction required higher tin content approaching 15 to 20%. These differentiated alloy specifications demonstrate understanding that material properties vary with composition, and that optimal formulations depend on intended use. The precision of these metallurgical specifications indicates they derived from systematic experimentation and accumulated experience. Archaeological analysis of early Mesopotamian metal artifacts confirms the technical sophistication described in textual sources. Chemical analysis of bronze objects from the early dynastic period reveals alloy compositions that match closely the ratios specified in metallurgical texts. The objects dating to approximately 2700 BC demonstrate consistent tin percentages averaging 9 to 11%, precisely within the range recommended for tools and weapons. This correspondence between archaeological evidence and textual specifications validates the accuracy of preserved metallurgical knowledge. The casting techniques employed for producing complex bronze objects demonstrate mastery of foundry procedures, including lost wax casting and piece mold construction. Archaeological recovery of clay molds from metal workshops at Ur and other sites reveals sophisticated multi-part mold designs that enabled production of objects with intricate details and hollow interiors. The technical knowledge required for successful casting includes understanding of metal flow characteristics, solidification behavior, and thermal management during cooling. The complexity of casting procedures documented through archaeological evidence indicates that Mesopotamian metalworkers possessed comprehensive practical knowledge of foundry operations. The heat treatment procedures described in metallurgical texts reveal understanding that metal properties could be modified through controlled heating and cooling cycles. The texts describe how copper and bronze objects should be heated to specific temperatures and quenched in water or oil to increase hardness. Alternative procedures involving slow cooling produce softer, more ductile materials suitable for applications requiring formability. This understanding of heat treatment effects on mechanical properties demonstrates sophisticated materials science knowledge that preceded formal scientific understanding of metallurgical phase transformations by millennia. The mining and ore processing techniques required for metal production demonstrate capabilities in extractive technologies and mineral processing. Archaeological investigation of ancient copper mines in the Araba Valley and other regions reveal sophisticated mining operations including shaft excavation, ore extraction, and beneficiation procedures that concentrated copper content before smelting. The organizational complexity required for mining operations, including labor management, tool production, and logistics for transporting ore to smelting sites, indicates substantial technical and administrative capabilities supporting metallurgical production. The social and economic impacts of metallurgy transformed Mesopotamian civilization by enabling new technologies, creating specialized craft industries, and establishing metal as medium of exchange. The availability of bronze tools increased agricultural productivity, enhanced military capabilities, and enabled sophisticated craft production. The value of metal objects created new forms of wealth that could be accumulated, stored, and transferred more efficiently than agricultural products. The development of metallurgy thus catalyzed economic and social transformations that fundamentally altered the organization of Mesopotamian society. Sumerian medical texts describe healing knowledge as established during the primordial period, when the goddess Ninhursag and the god Enki organized medicinal plants and established proper treatment protocols. These medical traditions preserved in temple archives include sophisticated pharmaceutical recipes, surgical procedures, and diagnostic methods that demonstrate comprehensive understanding of human anatomy and biochemistry. Archaeological discoveries of medical equipment and chemical analysis of ancient pharmaceutical preparations confirm the technical accuracy of textual descriptions, indicating that advanced medical knowledge was preserved from primordial establishment rather than developed through gradual experimentation. The medical corpus preserved in Sumerian and Akkadian texts encompasses comprehensive knowledge of diseases, or treatments, and prognostic indicators organized into systematic medical reference works. The diagnostic series known as the Diagnostic Handbook, compiled during the 2nd millennium BC but incorporating much earlier material, describes hundreds of disease conditions organized by affected body systems. Each entry provides detailed symptom descriptions, differential diagnostic criteria, and prognostic assessments that demonstrate sophisticated clinical observation and systematic categorization of medical knowledge. The comprehensiveness of this medical literature indicates that Mesopotamian physicians possessed extensive empirical knowledge about disease patterns and treatment outcomes. The pharmaceutical recipes preserved in medical texts demonstrate sophisticated understanding of medicinal plant properties and the principles of drug preparation. These recipes specify plant materials to be used, preparation methods including extraction, concentration, and combination procedures, and administration routes optimized for different conditions. The texts distinguish between internal medications administered orally, external applications for skin conditions, and specialized preparations for eyes, ears, and other specific body regions. This systematic organization of pharmaceutical knowledge demonstrates understanding that different delivery methods and formulations were required for different therapeutic applications. The surgical procedures described in medical texts reveal capabilities in invasive interventions that require detailed anatomical knowledge and technical skill. The texts document procedures including abscess drainage, cataract surgery, fracture reduction, and wound management that demonstrate hands-on surgical experience. The descriptions include specifications for surgical instruments, patient positioning, and wound closure techniques that parallel modern surgical principles. The preservation of surgical knowledge through textual transmission ensured that technical procedures could be learned through study and practice rather than requiring rediscovery through trial and error. Archaeological discoveries of medical instruments confirm the reality of surgical procedures described in texts. Excavations at various Mesopotamian sites have recovered bronze surgical implements, including scalpels, probes, forceps, and specialized instruments for specific procedures. These instruments demonstrate sophisticated metallurgical craftsmanship, producing sharp cutting edges, precise tips for delicate work, and ergonomic designs facilitating surgical manipulation. The physical evidence of specialized surgical equipment validates textual descriptions of invasive medical procedures and demonstrates that Mesopotamian medicine included surgical interventions alongside pharmaceutical treatments. Chemical analysis of residues from pharmaceutical vessels provides material evidence confirming the accuracy of drug preparation instructions preserved in medical texts. Analysis of pottery fragments from temple pharmacies has identified organic residues including plant alkaloids, mineral compounds, and animal products matching ingredients specified in pharmaceutical recipes. The chemical signatures of these residues indicate specific preparation methods including heating, fermentation, and solvent extraction that correspond to procedures described in medical texts. This correlation between chemical evidence and textual descriptions validates the technical accuracy of preserved pharmaceutical knowledge. The diagnostic procedures described in medical texts demonstrate systematic approaches to patient evaluation based on careful observation and established clinical criteria. The texts instruct physicians to examine patients thoroughly, noting physical signs including skin color, temperature, pulse characteristics, respiratory patterns, and excretion abnormalities. This comprehensive physical examination approach created diagnostic information enabling physicians to differentiate between similar conditions and select appropriate treatments. The systematic nature of diagnostic procedures indicates that Mesopotamian medicine operated according to standardized clinical methods rather than intuitive healing practices. The integration of medical practice with temple institutions created organizational frameworks for preserving and transmitting medical knowledge. Temple complexes housed medical facilities including treatment rooms, pharmaceutical preparation areas, and archives of medical texts. The association between medicine and religious institutions ensured that medical knowledge received institutional support and protection, while creating educational systems for training new practitioners. This institutional foundation for medical practice enabled accumulation and preservation of clinical knowledge across generations of practitioners. The therapeutic approaches described in medical texts demonstrate understanding that treatment must address underlying disease processes rather than merely suppressing symptoms. The texts distinguish between symptomatic treatments that provided immediate relief and curative interventions that addressed disease causes. This conceptual distinction between palliation and cure indicates sophisticated thinking about disease mechanisms and therapeutic strategies. The emphasis on curative treatments demonstrates commitment to restoring health rather than merely managing chronic conditions. Sumerian texts describe how primordial knowledge was sealed in underground repositories to preserve it through periods of catastrophe and cultural disruption. The Eridu Genesis and other primordial accounts reference the establishment of these knowledge preservation systems before the Great Flood, ensuring that essential information would survive for future civilizations. Archaeological discoveries of sealed chambers beneath the major temple complexes reveal sophisticated preservation systems designed to protect texts and artifacts across millennia. These underground repositories contained not only written records, but also technological artifacts and material samples that enabled reconstruction of advanced capabilities after catastrophic disruptions. The systematic nature of these preservation efforts indicates that knowledge protection was planned and executed according to comprehensive protocols established during the primordial period. The concept of deliberate knowledge preservation through physical repositories represents sophisticated understanding of information vulnerability and the need for redundant storage systems. Sumerian texts explicitly describe efforts to protect essential knowledge from loss through natural disasters, warfare, and cultural disruption by creating sealed archives in protected locations. The Eridu Genesis describes how the god Enki warned selected individuals about the coming flood and instructed them to preserve written knowledge by sealing tablets in underground chambers. This narrative framework presents knowledge preservation as intentional project requiring planning and resource allocation rather than accidental survival of documents. The archaeological evidence for underground chamber construction beneath major temple complexes confirms textual accounts of deliberate knowledge repositories. Excavations at Eridu, Nippur, and Uruk have revealed extensive subterranean installations, extending far beyond structural requirements for temple foundations. These underground chambers incorporate sophisticated construction techniques including waterproof bitumen barriers, drainage systems preventing groundwater infiltration, and ventilation arrangements maintaining stable atmospheric conditions. The engineering effort devoted to creating these protected underground spaces demonstrates that their construction served important functions beyond simple storage. The preservation technologies employed in underground repositories demonstrate advanced understanding of environmental factors affecting material degradation. The chambers incorporated climate control features maintaining stable temperature and humidity that prevented deterioration of organic materials including clay tablets, papyrus, and textile artifacts. Chemical treatments applied to chamber walls created antimicrobial environments, preventing biological degradation. The sophisticated preservation systems incorporated into repository design indicate that builders understood the environmental requirements for long-term material survival and deliberately engineered spaces meeting these requirements. The organization of materials within underground repositories reveals systematic approaches to information storage and retrieval. Archaeological investigation of accessible chambers shows that materials were organized by subject matter, with separate storage areas for different knowledge domains including astronomical texts, medical documents, mathematical tablets, and ritual instructions. This systematic organization enabled efficient retrieval of specific information when repositories were accessed. The deliberate organization of stored materials indicates that repositories were designed for active use rather than passive storage. The redundancy built into knowledge preservation systems through creation of multiple repositories at different locations demonstrates understanding of risk management principles. Important texts were copied and deposited in archives at multiple temple sites, ensuring that destruction of any single repository would not result in complete knowledge loss. Temple administrative records document exchange of texts between different cities, creating distributed archive networks that enhance preservation security. This distributed approach to knowledge storage mirrors modern data backup strategies emphasizing geographic redundancy. The inclusion of technological artifacts and material samples alongside written records in underground repositories indicates recognition that some knowledge could not be adequately preserved through textual documentation alone. Archaeological discoveries in sealed chambers include metal samples, mineral specimens, medicinal plants, and tool examples that demonstrated manufacturing techniques and preserved genetic resources. The combination of written instructions with physical examples created comprehensive knowledge preservation systems that maintained both theoretical understanding and practical capabilities. The timing of repository sealing described in flood narratives indicates that knowledge preservation activities occurred during periods of anticipated crisis rather than during stable conditions. The texts describe how repositories were sealed when catastrophic events appeared imminent, suggesting that preservation protocols were activated in response to specific threats. This crisis-driven preservation activity demonstrates that knowledge protection systems operated as disaster preparedness procedures rather than routine archive maintenance. The post-catastrophe reopening of sealed repositories described in Sumerian text presents knowledge recovery as a central component of civilizational reconstruction. The narratives describe how survivors accessed sealed chambers after the flood subsided, retrieving preserved knowledge that enabled rapid rebuilding of urban civilization. This knowledge recovery framework explains how sophisticated technologies and institutions could reappear quickly after catastrophic disruptions, rather than requiring centuries of gradual redevelopment. The incorporation of knowledge recovery procedures into preservation systems demonstrates comprehensive planning that anticipated both storage and eventual retrieval of protected information. The influence of Mesopotamian knowledge preservation concepts on later civilizations appears in similar traditions found in Egyptian, Hebrew, and Greek sources describing ancient wisdom sealed in hidden repositories awaiting discovery. These parallel traditions suggest that knowledge preservation through underground archives represented widespread ancient practice rather than unique Mesopotamian innovation. The consistency of these preservation narratives across different cultures indicates either common cultural contact or independent recognition of similar knowledge protection requirements. The archaeological confirmation of actual underground repositories validates these textual traditions and demonstrates that ancient civilizations invested substantial resources in protecting accumulated knowledge from loss through catastrophic disruption. The evidence accumulated across these domains of investigation points toward conclusions that fundamentally challenge conventional understanding of human civilizational development and the nature of knowledge transmission across millennia. The Sumerian records describing events before everything began preserve not mythological speculation, but systematic documentation of actual primordial organization that established the frameworks within which human civilization would develop. The consistency between textual accounts and archaeological evidence, the technical precision of preserved procedures, and the sophisticated integration of multiple knowledge domains all indicate that these ancient records transmitted genuine information rather than religious fantasy. The sudden appearance of advanced capabilities across multiple technological and institutional domains during the 4th millennium BC cannot be adequately explained through conventional models of gradual cultural evolution. Urban planning, writing systems, mathematical notation, astronomical observation, metallurgical techniques, agricultural engineering, medical knowledge, and governmental institutions all emerged in fully developed forms without clear developmental stages in the archaeological record. This simultaneous appearance of sophisticated capabilities across diverse domains supports Sumerian claims that civilizational knowledge descended from heaven as complete package rather than accumulating through centuries of human experimentation and innovation. The mathematical precision underlying Sumerian knowledge systems demonstrates capabilities that exceeded practical requirements for agricultural societies, suggesting access to advanced understanding that originated outside normal cultural development pathways. The base 60 numerical system, the sophisticated astronomical calculations, the precise architectural proportions, and the systematic organizational principles all reflect theoretical knowledge that could only derive from sustained intellectual investigation or transmission from external sources possessing comprehensive understanding. The integration of this mathematical knowledge into practical applications created civilizational capabilities that established foundations for human development extending across subsequent millennia. The preservation of primordial knowledge through institutional mechanisms including temple archives, scribal education, and underground repositories ensured transmission of essential information across catastrophic disruptions that destroyed surface civilizations. The deliberate construction of knowledge preservation systems demonstrates sophisticated understanding that civilizational continuity requires active protection of accumulated knowledge rather than passive reliance on cultural memory. The archaeological confirmation of sealed repositories and the documented survival of technical knowledge across political collapses validates the effectiveness of these preservation strategies. The cyclical pattern suggested by flood narratives and preservation protocols indicates that Mesopotamian civilizations understood their development as a recurring process rather than unique historical phenomenon. The division between antediluvian and post-diluvian periods, the systematic preservation of knowledge before anticipated catastrophes, and the protocols for knowledge recovery after disasters all suggest awareness that civilizational development followed cyclical patterns involving growth, catastrophic disruption, and reconstruction using preserved knowledge. This cyclical view of history contrasts sharply with modern assumptions about linear progress, and raises profound questions about whether contemporary civilization represents humanity's first achievement of advanced technological capabilities. The relevance of these ancient knowledge preservation systems for contemporary civilization becomes apparent when considering current vulnerabilities to catastrophic disruption through natural disasters, warfare, or technological failures. The Sumerian recognition that knowledge requires active protection and that civilizational continuity depends on successful information transmission across disruptions provides frameworks for understanding how to preserve essential capabilities through periods of crisis. The integration of written documentation with physical artifacts, the geographic distribution of archives, and the institutional mechanisms for knowledge transmission all offer principles applicable to modern preservation challenges. The evidence presented throughout this investigation suggests that human relationship with knowledge and technology may be far more complex than conventional historical narratives acknowledge. The possibility that advanced capabilities were transmitted rather than independently developed, that civilizations have risen and fallen in cycles extending across vast time periods, and that essential knowledge has been deliberately preserved through catastrophic disruptions, all challenge fundamental assumptions about human progress and cultural development. As contemporary civilization faces its own array of existential challenges, the ancient Sumerian understanding of knowledge preservation and cyclical renewal may provide crucial insights for ensuring that human achievements survive whatever disruptions the future may bring.